Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and it is August 14th, YC128, and this is the Eve Universe Show. Welcome, 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 guys. I am joined today by Ocky, who is he's a fan of the show for a while, and then also he hit me up the other day because he's actually been playing a lot of Eve Frontiers. Been getting really involved in it, into the hackathon and everything. And as people who've watched my show know, Frontiers is definitely one of those things I've been trying to pay attention to and keep track of. But like with all sorts of things with this kind of tech and whatnot, like it's a whole alien world. So things like the hackathon and stuff like that, like even with my programming experience, it's been kind of opaque from me as an outsider to get an idea for that. So when Ocky messages me and lets me know that he's been involved in all this stuff, I immediately be like, hey, can you come on to my stream tomorrow and talk to me about all this stuff? Because I need insight and information. And to his credit, dropped everything and was like, yeah, I totally can be here tomorrow. So here he is. Thank you so much for being here, Ocky.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting to talk about Eve and Frontier.
Excellent, excellent. And you guys can let me know how the sound levels are between the two of us or whatever. I'll try to do a correction. Also, just so everybody knows, if you're watching this live, we are doing that Legion skin giveaway. And then today we also do have some Eve news. We've got the MER and some other stuff to follow up on. But I wanted to give my interviewer the respect he deserves by letting him go first. And then after that, we'll discuss the other stuff. And then tonight, later on, we will be going on to my second channel, the Decanted channel, to play X4, which I've never played before. I just installed it, literally never even launched it yet. So we're going to see how that goes too. But before all that, we can begin with Ocky. So let's start. So you've known, you were saying that you've been watching the channel and stuff for like since last year, right?
Probably even longer than that. I think when I first found you, like I've always known about the channel, but I didn't watch stream, regularly. Up until about 2014, maybe even 2024, maybe even 2023. But then sort of when I moved over to Frontier, that sort of, took all the attention and time, so.
Okay, great. So, right. So you started, so you've been part of this whole thing. You come from the Eve side of things. You were interested in the Eve side of things. You started watching my stuff, but then you got into Frontiers, and it basically shifted all your attention over to Frontiers. Is that fair? Yeah,
so maybe I can do a quick run through of my time with Eve and then how I ended up where I am now. So when I first touched Eve, I was but a small kid, as most of us, around the age of, 16-ish, which was 2008. So I'm kind of dating myself a bit, but yeah. So around 2008, I played for about 2 years, and then some other stuff drew my attention, and then came back around the time that Incursions was really sort of the hot new thing, and was like a very
Incursions, so 2011, right?
Yeah, 2011, 2012. Yeah, and so I ran. I worked my way up in TDF at the time, for the armor fleets, and I sort of had a lot of fun with that. For those of you who don't know,
just a little bit of context. TDF is one of the major like incursion running setups. I don't know if they still are running around, but like they were one of the big groups that did incursions all the time. Specifically armor. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so you had the armor side, and then there was a different group for shield things. And but yeah, so I worked my way up and into FCing for some of that stuff. Mostly the 12-man Vanguard sites, I think they were called. And it really felt like you had this almost like a Formula One team of like how quickly you can rotate through these things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the things I always liked about incursions. I guess if you could say anything, I like to say like incursions are like, what if World of Warcraft released Molten Core and then just like never released any other raids, but then put rewards into Molten Core to make people just continually want to run it for the rest of time. And so like instead of being excited by the content, it quickly becomes an efficiency game, right? How how, especially since it's competitive, right? The team that does the most damage gets all the rewards. So it's very much like continuing to polish it down, which does have a tendency to cause some elitism, but it also makes the entire thing like, again, it's not something to explore, it's a thing to perform, you know?
Yeah, it was very much a perfecting sort of the craft of how quickly can you jump through the hoops type of thing. But yeah, so I played for a couple of years again, and then I got way too sort of, as one does with Eve, you get way too involved in it with like multiple alts and go crazy. And at that point, Flex was kind of starting to ramp up in cost, and a lot of the extra accounts for running was plexed. And so you just end up spending too much time on the game, and it's like, I need to cut back a bit.
Again, to put things into perspective for people now, when he says that Plex was starting to ramp up, when I first started joining when I first joined in 2810, so it's around the same area, I remember that one Plex, which remember back then one Plex was the same as 500 Plex now, one Plex was 350 million ISK when I first joined. So that would be the equivalent of 500 Plex right now being 350 million ISK. So when he says that it scaled up, like, people don't understand. Like, it's been this pretty, it's not like it all happened at once, but it did ramp up over time. But go on.
Yeah. I mean, it was like you would spend a Saturday, grinding to get 4 accounts plexed, and then it became, it went from maybe 4 hours on a Saturday to 6 to 8 to 12. Mm-hmm. Like, it just became this, as the demand for plex kept going up and up, because it went from 350 mil to 500 to 700, and yeah, you can see where it is today. So
right.
But yeah, so eventually I put it down again.
That burned you out.
Effectively, it's like, okay, the thing that I enjoyed doing the way that I was doing it was no longer viable in terms of time, and so I put it down. And other games. This was also, I mean, that period of time you had all the MOBAs, all the esports, all that stuff, going on. So there was a lot of other things besides Eve that was very shiny and interesting to look at. So I kind of drifted away from it.
2012 was a crazy time to be a nerd, that's for sure. There's a lot demanding your attention.
Yeah. So I drifted away from the game for a while. I always kept it in touch with it. And then get back into it around 2022-ish. I played Foxhole quite a lot. I don't know if you're familiar.
I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, so it's basically like a warfare red versus blue type thing, sort of an isometric shooting game. But you can, if people are interested, you can go take a look at that. I think there's a lot of interesting things design-wise that game also offers. But and in Foxhole, I met a bunch of guys that was like, we're tired of Foxhole, we want to go and play Eve. So they invited me back, and it's like, okay, I haven't played in a bunch of years. If I can recover my accounts, then I'll pick it up again and go from there.
So this is 2022, you said, right?
Yeah, so this would be about 21, 22.
So that's like right in the middle of scarcity, when everything's changing, everything's being shook up, everybody's mad.
Yeah. So as I came back, I mean, they were already playing it. They kind of were in low sec for a long time, and then they moved to null to join one of the small alliances in Winterco. Like, all this stuff, I was not, I just came to play with some buddies, so I had no idea what the politics was at the time, the situation, any of that stuff. And I sort of just jumped back in. It's like, okay, I guess this is sort of, I recognize these groups, I don't recognize those guys. And yeah, I spent about 2 years or so in null, during which time I got involved in Eve again, and all the content creation and keeping track of things and watching things regularly. So that's kind of when I started popping up in your chat.
Sure. Yeah. So how do we go from that to Frontiers? Were you like an early adopter of Frontiers? What originally caught your attention with that?
Yeah, so funny enough, in the Winterco Discord, someone just dropped a link to Project Awakening at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Just no explanation of what it is. Just here's a random link to something related to CCP. I don't even know if it was obviously like something CCP was doing.
What could possibly go wrong with random Discord links, right? Yeah. What could possibly go wrong?
So I got curious. Yeah, I got curious and took a look, and it said, Project Awakening, we're doing a hackathon. This was in phase 2, so this would have been 2014, like June-ish, I think, maybe even sooner than that, maybe even March.
Wait, when?
They were like
2024. Right?
This was 2024. I keep
okay.
missing that number.
I'm pretty sure that we didn't have blockchain, let alone frontiers in 2014.
Yeah.
So there's a hackathon. That caught your eye.
Yeah, well, the link took you there, and it says like we're hosting this thing. If you have experience working with this, Ethereum technology, this. So my background is in software engineering, so I am familiar with your traditional way of making software, but that stuff was completely foreign. Like, everybody, was there during COVID with all the NFTs and all that nonsense. So that's sort of, from an outsider looking in, that was your kind of perspective of like, this mess is going on over there. I don't really get it, or I'm not involved in it in any way, but it's making headlines. And some video game companies are trying some stuff with this, but it's not really sticking. People don't really like it, or the way they're doing things is just not that good.
So you have a background in software development, but you were never really big into the NFT craze or even the crypto craze up until this point. But you're like, I'm a software developer. This is a hackathon. That's kind of interesting. Okay, cool. What is your normal medium, if I might ask, when it comes to like software development?
I kind of so my qualification is in computer and electronic engineering. Okay. So technically hardware is where I'm supposed to be, embedded systems, that sort of thing. But like, as most qualifications, there's more profitable things. So web dev, servers, backend, like the traditional stack of like development tends to be, that's kind of what I've been doing in recent years, but starting next year, I'm going kind of a little bit back to hardware stuff again with some new projects.
Okay, very cool. So okay, great.
It's kind of moved around, but nothing blockchain related.
Oh, that's fair. So, but back to the story though. You see Project Awakening, you see there's a hackathon, and you're like, that's cool.
Yeah. So initially, at that time, it wasn't apparent that this is like a CCP thing. It looked completely separate. Like it wasn't even. There was no branding, no nothing. So at the time, I was looking at it. It's like I don't know what these things are, so I put it down again. This was about phase 2, and then the original teaser trailer came out, which would have been in August or September of that year, and then I kind of put two and two together of like, oh, this thing I looked at, earlier in the year, this is what it was about, and then it was obvious to everybody that this is a CCP thing at the time, now Fenris. But yeah, so hopped in at about playtest 4, which would be August, September of 24. And I've just kind of been going since.
So you didn't participate in that first hackathon?
No, not that very early one. We did participate in the one for 25, and our team did win that one. So I did to go to... Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. I definitely want to jump into that deeper when we get to it, but for now we're still piecing together the timeline. But
yeah. Okay. So that was very much a team effort of like 6 or 8 people at the time. They did make the group smaller for this year's hackathon, so we couldn't quite do the same group and projects we did back then. But yeah, 25 was kind of jumped into Frontier with. In around the end of 24, and then we had Founder Access start, and then the hackathon sort of early in the year, about February, March-ish of 25, won that, and then it kind of just, kept going, then the Luminary thing came into play, and all those things. So, but we can get.
You mentioned Luminary. Let's jump on that real quick. So, a lot of people that watch my show will know about the CSM, the Council of Stellar Management, or the CPM, Council of Planetary Management, that has existed before. But every year, we as EVE players vote on a council of players that represent us to FC. They get to go to Iceland. They're under NDA. They get formal presentations about stuff. They're able to give presentations about stuff. They're kind of like given a certain amount of authority to speak on behalf of the community because of this. And so, as I mentioned, like they've done this kind of thing with things like Dust and Vanguard 2. However, because a lot of those other projects are either newer or, in the case of Dust, shorter lived, it never really got the same firm like sense of process that the CSM has gotten. But it's still true. Like the CSM is so popular within the gaming space and EVE Online and stuff that they definitely like to get that in as early as possible. So to that end, in EVE Frontiers, it's called the Luminary system, right? And they originally, like with the CPM, they picked their original luminaries with this promise of some future process to sort out who's going to be luminaries in the future, right? And you were one of the ones that was chosen by then CCP to be a luminary, correct?
Yeah. So, whatever the criteria was, they haven't really told us, but they kind of identified a handful of people, different play styles, a couple content creators, a couple, big group leaders, those sorts of things, like just to get a variety of voices, a variety of play styles. It's not perfect, as these things can't. It's very hard to get, to condense your entire community down into like 8 people. So it's there are groups that I think. Yeah. So the
you're
size
one
right
of 8
now,
people. That's a huge vote of like confidence by FC. So did this happen after or before you won the hackathon?
This was after.
Okay. I was going to ask, like, how did you get picked among everyone? But I guess winning the hackathon is a pretty good way to do it.
If I had to speculate on the reason, a lot of my time in the community was spent teaching people how to make third-party tools. Just sort of digesting the tech and then the documentation and stuff that they've put out from their side. And then if people have questions, just sort of helping individuals get their things working or giving them examples of how to do certain things. Very, sort of, I want to lock my gate so that only my group can jump through. How do I do that? And then, walking them through that process, that sort of thing. Just like a very basic, only check for this corporation. And
right.
Only, so I think that's, if I had to guess, like I'm not sure, but that was where the majority of my sort of interest in the game has always been, is the builder side of things, how we can extend this world outside of its bounds.
And it is true that there's a very, like, as far as like a percentage of the population, there's a very active development community that is being supported by FC in the Discord and stuff. So I'm assuming that that's where you participate in helping people out a lot.
Yeah, so that's still sort of the thing that I'm the most interested in. Obviously, the rest of the game, I mean, it still has to be a good game at the end of the day, right? Even if bunch of IT nerds can make things, like push a button outside of the game and it's like, oh, look, the fancy thing in the game is doing things. Like, that is cool from a sort of IT nerd perspective, but it still needs to be fun for the rest of the player base. And so I do chime in where needed on things like, design and things, if they request feedback on stuff. Because they're extremely active, the dev team in general, of like asking for people's opinions on things.
So then help me understand a little bit. Let's explore this a little bit, because I have a software development background, but again, like, this has all been so opaque to me. Like, this idea of, oh, it's fully extensible and you can make your own stuff, and like the promise of Eve Frontiers is of course incredible, but the question that I always kind of come back to is like, where is the practical, right? Like, when I go into the game, I can just deploy the stuff that I can deploy. It's not like I can make a brand new type of building or some sort of listen, just reading what FC has to say about it and like watching the overhead stuff doesn't actually give me a feeling of what the extensibility really represents. You're talking about like being able to change the passcodes on a Stargate, but you're just using, it's just a customized Stargate, right? Like, the framework has to already exist. Can you help me understand, like, what exactly is the limits and capabilities of this kind of extensibility due to this, like, process?
Yeah. So this is something that's probably very strange for people, that whenever you think of mods in a video game, you either think of something like only client-side mods. Like, I know there's a lot of people that, you put in your own little texture in a single-player game or even a multiplayer game, but that only you can see.
When I think of mods, especially like MMO mods, I think of like World of Warcraft, right? Where you can recontextualize information, you can change the UI and display. There's some other things too, but like beyond it's basically a UI layer, not some. You can't mod a boss into the game.
Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of the thing I think a lot of people immediately go to when they think mods. It's either that, like client-side only stuff, or if it does include server-side stuff, you're thinking about things like custom maps in Rust or in Gary's mod or something like that, where you install the mods on the server and then the client maybe downloads those mods when it connects to the server the first time. Things like that. This goes further. It's different than those things in that the mod you install, you publish them on chain, and we can talk a bit about why that makes sense to do as a technology.
I've talked about that a lot too in the past, so that part doesn't bother me. Like I said, I just kind of want to know, like, what does it even mean? So keep going.
Yeah. So what then happens is whenever something in the game needs information or logic, it will then reach out to your custom stuff, fetch, So a very simple example of this would be something like a turret. Like you can think about POSs, they have guns around them. The way it's defined right now is there's no way for you, besides the few like buttons that FC gives you in game, of like customizing how turrets behave. For Frontier, the turret sends your custom logic a bunch of like parameters of like, this is the current shield, hull, and armor of the ship. This is the type of ship. This is the person's name. This is the tribe they belong to or corporation. And then based on all of those fields, it also sends you the current list of targets. So if there's already a bunch of people on grid, it sends you that list as well, and you can then change the list depending on target priority. You can go through the existing targets and say, okay, prioritize by lowest shield, or only shoot at groups of this type, or only shoot at these ship types. But it is limited in that sense. In FC has to give us those hooks of like, these are the things you can customize in the world, but what you do beyond that point is sort of completely open.
So you can like create customized logic and behavior for the tools, but basically it's almost like the pieces in Frontiers are like a library that you can then like hook into via code and like receive information from and push results to. But ultimately the fact that it is a turret and what a turret is to do and what a turret information what information a turret can give you and what information a turret is looking to receive is all defined by the nature of a turret. You can't now make it like, I want to make a turret that heals people. Like you don't, it doesn't go that far. So, okay.
So it's not, at this stage at least, you can't just put, like I've seen a lot of comments whenever Frontier comes up with like, what's going to prevent people from making a gun that does 1 billion damage, or some silly things like that.
Right.
What they eventually want to get to is for you to be able to do more of that custom stuff, but then in order for that to be supported, there has to be this foundation of rules put in place. So the way you can think about it is like, you can take like a family car versus a sports car, right? A family car, it's built using certain materials, it has certain sort of performance capabilities, and it's going to have a certain amount of, or it'll have a certain cost to it. Whereas a supercar, it can go a lot faster, but it's using exotic materials, the price is higher, it can't run for as long, like all those sorts of things. And that's what they mean by like
space physics being defined by the system, right? Like basically what FC hopes to do is like define how materials work, how gravity works, how air drag works. So you can build a car, but you still have to adhere to the rules of physics, of weight and air drag, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not there yet. Right now we just have, here's a car, and all that stuff is already baked into it, and you can like customize the paint or why the doors unlock.
And sort of the first step to going to that sort of lower levels of granularity is this move to modularity that they're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
So in EVE Online, sort of the smallest unit you play with is this ship. Like, you have a range of a couple hundred ships, I think, at this point. And they each have specific parameters and roles and bonuses and so on. What they're doing now is they're saying, okay, we want to go smaller than just a ship. So let's take a ship and chop it up into a bunch of blocks or like pieces. And
it's kind of like everything's like a T3 cruiser almost, but like it's not a complete T3 cruiser. It's like as if you had the subcomponents and then you stick the subcomponents together to make your own T3 cruiser.
Basically, yeah. So instead of it being like, these are the Legion subsystems, it's like, here is just a pile of stuff. You can put any of them together. And some of them, it's not entirely clear how limiting they want to be with that at this stage. For example, some ship pieces might still have like hard point.
Right.
So that you can fit,
It sounds very much like the difference between like a No Man's Sky ship versus a No Man's Sky Corvette, or like a Starfield Corvette, where you don't get your ship. Like in No Man's Sky, originally the ships are just the ship, and you can put stuff in the ship, different weapon systems, different bonuses, and all that sort of stuff. But then they came out with the ability to do Corvettes, where you got parts of ships, and then you assemble them together however you want, and that customizes both the look, but also the performance of those ships. And then on top of that, you still put in all of your modules and augmentations and all that kind of stuff once the ship is built.
Yeah, exactly. I think I gave you a screenshot of kind of the new fitting that we can look at.
Let me pull that up
at some point to give people kind of an idea.
Yeah, we've already looked at a lot of this stuff in previous videos, especially the previews of stuff. But let me pull this up real quick.
Yeah, I think the fitting at least is new with the current cycle. But yeah, so with cycle 6, they very much like moved a lot more away from sort of the way things were in EVE Online.
This looks very much like a Mech Warrior, right? Where you have like parts of the ship, and then those parts of the ship have different things in space and stuff to put in it. Okay, but I want to take a step back for a little bit, because I want to see like where we're at right now. I'm so interested in this hackathon, because again, like that's the piece of this that I don't get, because I've heard the explanation of things like the turret and the Stargate, and that's fine, great. I can figure out like, okay, I can make a little custom logic. But how do you get from there to a hackathon? How creative did people actually get? And again, like I tried to like look into the different hackathon stuff, and like for some reason when I start looking at the actual implementation, like my brains can't go from I customize a turret stuff to kind of the stuff that people were talking about doing in the hackathon. So I guess let's start with what did you guys what did you do to win the hackathon? What was your project?
Okay, so for 2025, the thing that we built, there was some other technologies that was also relevant at the time, which is this idea of proofs. The idea is basically proofs. So
proofs.
I can prove to you that something is true. So to explain, they're called zero knowledge proofs.
Before you jump into this, and this is exciting, I do want to point out that like this is one of those things that like becomes very, like, it is true that Frontiers is a blockchain based thing, but for those of you who don't know that much about blockchain, that just think about it as being scary or whatever, like really what blockchain is as a tech, for those of us who build things, is an interesting way of establishing, developing, and maintaining trust and knowledge in low trust environments. And so this idea of proof, this idea of like, how do we really know? You know, I talked about this the other day where it's like in Eve or in all sorts of video games, you never want it to be client authorized, because then the client can just spoof whatever the hell they want. So this idea of like, how do we know what is true is one of those questions that like is central to blockchain kind of ideology and why people get so excited about it. So it makes sense that in a game or in a system that's about that sort of stuff, that you kind of double down on that concept for your project. Either way, sorry, I just wanted to give that background. Go ahead and keep going.
Yeah. So for EVE Online specifically, there's a couple problems with that technology, right? The main one, and just so people understand, everything about the game is not on chain at this point, right? They still have a server, because the actual active gameplay of like flying your ship, shooting at other players, all that stuff, that is still your traditional MMO tech. The stuff that they tend to put over to the chain is more like facts of the world.
Right.
Like, for example, when you create a
database.
character, it's just a place where information is stored, and it's a place that is not controlled or maintained by CCP directly. And I can give you a nice example of how that's beneficial for sort of the ecosystem. If you go and look at the ESI right now, or I think it's still called the ESI. I think they changed the UI, but it's still the ESI. You go to the ESI and you look at the kill mail section, you will see that you can only pull kill mails up to 90 days old, right? So if I wanted to build a competing product to Zkill at this point in time, coming into the game 20 years past, there's no way for me to get kill mail information. I either have to go and ask Zkill, like, can you guys give it to me? Or I have to scrape their site to get all that stuff, which would not be a very nice thing to do. Or I have to try and get it from CCP or some other place, right? Like, as it exists right now, the way Zkill sort of aggregates kill mails across multiple people's tokens as they log into that website, there's no way for you to just have access to that history. Right. Whereas with the chain, that stuff is just always, it's published once by FC to the chain, and it's done. Like, it's, as long as the chain lives, that information is part of it, and you can go back and you can look at it at any point in time.
This is actually really important. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. So that's just one example of, like, you know, there is a benefit to this sort of approach of doing things over just a traditional server.
I do want to jump in there real quick because I remember even back in the day when this whole blockchain stuff was first blowing up during the Not for Tranquility era, we did have a dev hop into my stream at one point and was talking about the fact that, like, even if they were to want to implement a blockchain kind of thing or an NFT kind of thing for EVE Online, it would be more to replace the ESI. Exactly what you're saying. That's actually one of the things that they were talking about. Although his example wasn't Killboard, it was like, well, a good thing was like around this same time, the ESI was getting hammered, and so specific endpoints were actually being taken down. One of the big ones was the market endpoint had to get taken down for a period of time, because there was so much transactions with it. And even as a developer, there's all these rate limitings and all that sort of stuff, because they have to host the server. The server has to handle all these different requests. By putting it on a blockchain, by putting that data on the blockchain, they're kind of outsourcing the infrastructure of that data. You no longer have to come to a centralized point for that data because it's distributed through the blockchain maintenance system already. And so it already handles some things like load balancing and, you know, that kind of stuff. And so, like, even then they were talking about, hey, what if we put some of the data that, like, comes from EVE Online in a public ledger, like a blockchain? That would be more of a value than having NFT tokens be part of EVE. They said that even then. And so this really said, like, that is really the big promise of Frontiers, is this idea that, like, the data is not, like, the rules were originally set up by FC, but in the end, the data is maintained actually external from FC on the blockchain, and therefore we're all kind of working with that. We get to kind of hijack that infrastructure to our own benefit.
Yeah, and so because some of those sort of facts of the universe is public, this is one part of the problem that they're sort of having to solve, is everything you put on there is inherently public, but in EVE you still want some things to be hidden and secure, and sort of, you know. And I can give you a funny example of that from sort of past cycles. For cycle 1 to 4, which was most of 2025, whenever you put down a structure, the structure, in order for things like the turrets to work and for gates to, you know, for you to be able to dictate who can go through a gate or not, it would mirror a part of its logic on chain so that we can then interact with it. That stuff was public, including the location of the structure. So people could just know where everything is at all times. And so
I remember there were maps for it. You could go and look at, like, every single jump gate that was made by a player. And, like, people were like, well, maybe that's not great. That's not the best.
Yeah. So it was a problem where, like, this whole new idea of chain hunting started becoming a thing, where people would just sort of sift through other people's stuff and then find juicy targets to go and hit. Luckily now, since going over from the old Ethereum-based thing over to Sui, which is sort of this new partnership they have, they've managed to hide at least the locations. So you can still see who owns what and sort of what is inside of different places, but you don't know where it is, which already, you know, helps a lot.
Right.
If you are heading in the direction of, like, security and sort of confidentiality.
You can see how many Ensilabixes Imperium has, but not where they are or who can go through them.
Yeah, right. Effectively. Like, you can see if they're online, you can see which two of them are connected to each other, but you don't know where those two are. Funny enough, we did build some tooling. One of the guy that built the map that you looked at, Lacal, he made EF map and a bunch of other tools. But him and me and a bunch of other guys, we sort of talk about this stuff quite frequently. But we were able to look at the distance between the connections and sort of map to star combinations of, like, okay, given the distance between them, these are the likely places. But it's still, like, you know, a dozen locations in the universe of where that pair of stars could be.
That's so cool. I mean, I don't know, that sort of stuff gets exciting to me. Although it does bring up the point that, like, the stars actually move around, though, too. So you could actually track it over multiple days, right? And then see the differences within the thing and be like, oh, this pool of 5, you know, now gets whittled down to 1 because they were this distance before, and now they're this distance, and that only corresponds to these stars, right? Could you theoretically do that?
So things don't move in Frontier. at the moment.
I swear to God they did. Wait, are you serious? Did they at one point?
They have so they've simulated the universe sort of in steps a bunch of times and sort of iterated over them. So things have changed cycle to cycle, but they are still intended to sort of be a static map.
I swear to God, and like now okay, well, whatever. Because I remember like a few cycles ago, there was a whole problem where people would put down stargates, and then like a couple days later, those stargates would break because the distance between the stars had changed. So you're saying that
yeah.
isn't what's happening, or what? Did they stop it?
I don't know why those things broke.
I was just wrong the whole time? Okay, great. Good to know. I'm always glad to know that I've been like spouting nonsense for a while. All right, so the universe doesn't move simulated on a grand scale like that, but they do want to do that. I know that.
Yeah, it's something they probably could do if they wanted to.
Okay, great. Let's bring this back.
They should have the tech for it, yeah.
What exactly did you end up doing for your hackathon then?
Okay, so for the 2025 one, the theme was to use a thing called proofs. And I'll quickly, in a very simple way, explain what it is. But it's a way to show that you can prove that something is true without revealing what that thing is. So here's a very simple example. Imagine I have a little safe box with like those dials that you have to dial the combination in.
Right.
At the top of this box, we make a little slit where you can put like a piece of paper into it. I want to prove to you that I know the combination of this box without telling you the combination so that you can just like open it yourself. I don't want you to be able to open the box, but for whatever reason, I need to show to you that I can open the box. So the way we do this is you write something on the piece of paper, you throw it into the little opening, and it's in the box. And then I turn my back to you, I fiddle with the thing, and I open it up, and I tell you what's on the piece of paper, or I give you the piece of paper back, or whatever. So now you know at least I've opened this little box once. But that might be a fluke. Maybe I guessed it.
I understand. So like basically you can have an encryption key, right? And I want to prove that I have your encryption key. So you can encrypt a message, and then if I can tell you back your message, that means that I've proven that I have your encryption key without revealing what the key is.
Yeah, okay. Basically.
I'm with you so far.
And the way, so the first time you do this, it might be like just by chance, but then you repeat this exercise, and this is sort of what the math does internally with this stuff, is it repeats that exercise a certain number of times until the probability of me guessing the code is so small that we can just call it and say it's like, okay, yeah, you know the code. We're not gonna, keep going with it. But at no point did I tell you what the code or the combination was. And so the way we used it was as part of sort of a shared storage system where you want only people that have contributed to the storage should be able to remove things from that storage, but people don't necessarily want to reveal how much they contributed. Otherwise it becomes a whole thing of like, you can only take this much stuff because you only did this amount of work and yada, yada, yada. So the idea was, and because everything's public on chain, we wanted to make a system where it's like, I can prove to anybody else that I've made contributions to this thing, which entitles me to get a share of the contents without necessarily disclosing exactly how much I've contributed.
Okay, but this is all very abstract. Can you make this concrete? Like, how does this actually happen in Frontiers?
So the way you would do things is it would just be like a UI interface. I wonder if I can still find.
Well, so is there a box in space?
Yeah. So
physical okay.
So currently there's 3 sort of assemblies that we can play with as sort of third-party devs. 2 of them we've already mentioned, which is a gun in space. It's like you can control who gets shot. The other one is gates, so you can just control who's allowed to go through. And then the last one is just a box in space.
Right.
And you can control when people put things in the box, then you can decide what happens, or when people take things out of the box. And so the box is the most interesting one because it's the most, you can do the most things with it, right? You can have shared storage where it's like, okay, you have to put in a password, and once you put in the password, you can take things out of the box. You can do an arcade machine where people put in a fee and they play Snake or they play Space Invaders or whatever you want to do, and then if they get a certain score, they can take things out of the box. Like there's all sorts of...
So you can create your own like whole UI. So you could be like, I've rebuilt Minecraft in Frontier. And so you go up to my box and you open it up and it like opens up another window and there's Minecraft. And if I beat the Ender Dragon, then that allows me to pull out whatever's in the box. Like obviously that's very difficult, but like theoretically speaking, that would be like an extreme version of what this could actually be.
Yeah, so to give you an idea of that, if you go to that last link that I showed you, which is sort of the community gallery link, I don't know if you can click on any. I think you can probably click on Cradle. Cradle is still active.
Which one? The community gallery link didn't send me anything that I could actually like pull up that I found. But either way, okay. So we have a box. You want to be able to prove that people have put things into a box without maintaining a list of all the people that have put things in the box. You want a person to be able to prove that they are one of the people that have put things into the box without revealing what they did put in the box. That's the challenge, right?
Basically, that's the idea, is if you've contributed to this thing in some capacity, you are entitled to, a share of it. You can think of it like, let's say people do a mining op, and you want to just give everybody an equal cut that showed up to the op without having people say it's like I deserve 50% because I did 50% of the work, that sort of thing. You just want to, like, you can say, okay, everybody that shows up to the mining op, you can get a ship that's fitted, regardless of how much contribution you necessarily made during the op. So that's sort of something you could probably use it for, where it's like, whenever you put stuff in the box, it gives you this proof back, and you can use that sort of piece of information on a different system to tell that system's like, here is the proof that I participated in this activity, and that allows me to then...
the proof. So I take my mineral, put it in the box. What exactly do I get back? How do I get...
So in that specific example, there was this whole... That was sort of the technology of like this third-party thing that was partnered with CCP at the time, Fenris. They built like this special thing that lives in your browser, because the windows you see when you open, the interface to these things, it's basically a browser window. Like you can literally run a website on localhost on your own machine, and then put localhost into the address of that structure, and it'll load the website. And so whatever you do whatever you can do with web today, you can just use as part of your sort of application. And so this thing that they built was this technology of proofs, and then also the thing that can store those proofs in your browser, sort of like an extension. And so you basically, it's like a special cookie, and then you have a special jar for. Is it me?
No, my dog jumped on my lap, and then jumped off my lap, and in the process spun my gain on my mic. So I noticed that my mic was suddenly like half volume. So, but okay. So basically, they created effectively a cookie system that works within Eve Frontier, so that way you could store this stuff. Was that also on Sui? So you're practicing. So you're basically testing out this other service.
Yeah. So this was back when things were still on Ethereum.
Oh yeah, that's true. It was still on Ethereum.
Yeah. So, yeah, they wanted to use that technology as one of the ways to hide information, and so that hackathon, which was a lot smaller than this year's version, was sort of, can you do interesting things with this tech? Because we are interested in using it in the game, but before we really kind of decide what we're going to do with it, we'd like you guys to play with it for some rewards.
Got it. Okay, so this feels almost like a papercraft version of the playtesting, right? None of this is real. This isn't how it actually would play out, but we've gotten the pieces together enough so that way you can go through the steps of doing this and have it work, right? Like no one's actually claiming that it's working the way it should, but there's this kind of temporarily constructed system that acts the same, basically, right?
That's kind of what the hackathons have been, is they will get to a certain point with this stuff and then give it to the community and be like, go crazy, go see what you can do with it. And so like a lot of the common stuff that was built this year, for example, is sort of infrastructure management dashboard type things where it's like, you can think of it like as if Eve's ACL systems existed outside of the game as a separate thing, right? So even right now, like I can log into a website, I don't have to spin up the game client, and I can add someone to an ACL list, or I can adjust a member, permissions somewhere in our infrastructure without ever touching the game client. I can do it on a phone if I wanted to.
Right. And rather than like an API, like you can do stuff with ACLs, I think, with API, but that would still be pushing it to the main database. This is actually different. This is you're using an external tool that the game reaches out to and respects.
Exactly. And it also means that, like, for example, if we keep going with this ACL idea, those endpoints that you're referring to with ESI, those things have been defined by FC, and that's like the only, there's restrictions. And I mean, they're changing a bunch of that stuff now with the changes they're making to NullSec. But even those existing systems, before these recent changes, you could already see that there was a mismatch between the organizations that exist in EVE Online and sort of the tools that they have available, which is why things like Alliance Auth and Seed and all those things sort of popped up.
Right.
Whereas,
yeah, no, for sure.
So I can give you an example of how it's then different. What happens is if you fly up to a gate in Frontier and you tell the gate, I want to jump through, the gate then reaches out to our system and says, here's a bunch of information about this ship, this character, all that sort of stuff. Should I let him through, yes or no? That's the only interaction that the server expects. So even the whole structure of like, how do you organize permissions, like all of that stuff we can design in any way that we want.
Correct. Yeah, I get that.
So like things like coalitions can just be a natural part of the permission system, because we can build all of that stuff custom. And that's sort of the power of it, right? It's the primitives and the actions that they give us are very simple and very straightforward, but that's the sort of the final action that needs to be taken in game. How you arrive at that yes or no answer for like allowing someone through a gate could be a very complicated process of like looking at standings that you have built your own system for, or looking at recent kill mails, or looking at this, or looking at that. You can define all of that logic in any way that you feel is useful.
Okay, so let me try to be a little cynical about this project and kind of describe it, and you can tell me why, in what ways I'm right and which ways I'm wrong. So yeah, effectively, there's a third-party tool that they are integrated with for the purposes of this hackathon that manages proofs. And so you fly up to the box and you put a box in it, and it effectively stores a cookie in your own thing that's like, hey, this guy has put something into the box. So that way later on, if somebody wants to check to see if I put something in the box, I have this little tag on in my system being maintained by this third party or this other system that's like, hey, this guy did it. What stops me from spoofing the cookie? What stops me from like hijacking the cookie and just saying that I am that?
The cryptography.
It's not a list that's maintained by the other thing, right?
Yeah. So in that specific case, the ZK proof technology is a cryptography solution so that you cannot spoof it, right? Like man, this is the thing that even I struggle to comprehend, because ZK proofs is a very like it's arcane level mathematics. But if
you're saying that something's stored in my browser though, right?
Yeah. So
I should be able to somehow, like, couldn't I capture that and just replicate it on another account and then be like, haha, see, I also turned something in.
You can do that, but the information that's stored inside of that thing would, for example, be tied to a specific event, a specific character, a specific date, even. Like,
so the checker could open it up and be like, oh, this guy isn't the person that this code is connected to.
Yeah. And that's sort of part of what makes that tech so powerful is you can have all the information locally on your side, but you can choose which parts of it to reveal to the system that's checking against it. So, yeah. But I'm not sure how much of ZK they're still going to be using going forward. Which is the
sure, yeah. Like I said, this is paper playcraft version of this whole thing, just to prove out the concept. I'm just trying to make sure like where the boundaries and reality of this whole thing is, right? Is it just that you're maintaining an extra list? Doesn't sound like you are, because it's something that you now have on your client that is that authentication that can somehow be properly validated to being the correct client to own that. I could be like, oh yeah, those aren't your keys. I can tell that you have a key, but I can also tell that key isn't yours. And that's what's critical here.
Based on who presented it, you can also make that judgment. But the key thing with that ZK stuff is, one system can create this sort of data packet. You own the data packet. It doesn't live on a server or somewhere else. It's like it's in your browser or in a wallet or in some storage container of some sort. And then when necessary, you can present this data packet even to a completely different system that is not hooked up to the one that issued it initially. And it can, based on that packet and how it's sort of, cryptographically secured, it can make the judgment just on that information. And so the way a lot of, systems today work is if I do something with this system, that system will reach out to the original one and says like, look, this guy just asked me for permissions about stuff. Can I give it to them or not? But if system one is down when you make that request, you then have to deny that person access, because it's like, well, I can't verify that you're legit. This sort of makes it possible to do that, async, where you don't have to rely at all on the system that issued it. You just have to trust that system and the things that it sort of comes out.
Doesn't that though run the risk of being like, because for security you have protection from being stolen, protection from interjection, but also availability. Don't you run the risk of like, if that token exists in one place and nobody fully understands how it works, couldn't that token become slightly corrupted and then just nobody can ever verify anything about it?
Yes, that is very much a possibility. These things are all like technologies with trade-offs and advantages.
For sure. And yeah.
That would be one of them. Is like, if you throw away the token, then tough luck. Like that was the thing. You cannot lose it otherwise. Yeah. So that is one of the trade-offs for something like that.
Right. And then that also means that depending on how it is, like I can put stuff in a box and then I log in on a different computer and it might not recognize that I've put the thing in the box, depending on how the system works.
Funny enough, that was a problem for a lot of players in the earlier cycles. So if we go and look at the blockchain ecosystem, and again, this stuff is hidden for the average player in the current way the game plays. But back then, they were still sort of figuring out, like, okay, how do we navigate some of these problems? One of the problems they had was the moment you created your character, it would save access to that character on the local device. And so when people were trying to log into their accounts at work or on a different, like on a laptop or something else, they couldn't access their characters because that thing was like, you know, on the original device that created the character. And so they had to do that. They had to copy access to the character over from one device to another in order to access it on both. They did eventually get around to it, but since then, with the move to SWE, there's a whole new system where FC sort of is part of that loop, and so at any point in time, they can give you access to characters again. If you want to know the technical term for this, it is custodial versus non-custodial wallets and access.
All right.
The idea... So if it's non-custodial, then you are responsible for everything. If it is custodial, then it means FC is managing it on your behalf.
Right.
So they've
like
switched.
In theory, instead of putting the cookie on the person's computer, your system could have like reached out to some sort of other server and it was like, here's my list of guys, and then just check the list there and done kind of the same thing. But then it would be a list on that server, not a thing that's on any given client's control, which of course Frontiers is all about how much can we distribute the information and still have it work, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is fascinating, and thank you for walking me through that whole process, and thank you for all of you who are patient enough to walk through a bunch of this technical stuff. I think I'm ready to ask you kind of my foundational question that I really want to tackle during this interview, and we can continue to explore this topic afterwards. But do you believe in this? Like, they talk so much about their promises of what it is, and like the further they get into like the space physics and their idea, like when they talk about their ideas for this whole thing, it feels like it's a very different thing than what is actually in front of us. And so like even having participated in the hackathons and like the difference between what is real versus like what you're able to do here, do you think that they're actually going to be able to pull this off? Do you think that there's a real there, or are we just all kind of playing around pretending that it'll one day be this other thing with blockchain and public distribution? Because there's all these like hindrances to it and confusions to it, but like you've been in this more than anybody. Do you actually think that they are in the route of pulling this off?
Yeah, it's a hard thing to tackle because it depends on where they sort of draw the line. It depends on how much time they have to work on this thing. You know, there's a bunch of stuff that we just don't know, because
much of what they say sounds like gobbledygook to people who don't know what they're talking about. Like their whole thing about like layers of physics and biology and like it all sounds super fucking cool, but like what is this? How does this become a game?
Yeah, so a lot of that stuff, the white paper stuff, is very like conceptual, you know, and very abstract in that sense of like, if we were to continue breaking these things down from like ships to components to, you know, smaller and smaller pieces, then we can get down to those levels of granularity. I don't know if that's going to be something they pull off. Like that's the thing that stuff is so like out there compared to what the reality is of making a game, that it's sort of the stuff. It's like, okay, I can see this being sort of a compass for you guys of like, we want to go in that direction, but it's not the map of like, this is how you get from point A to point B. That is sort of being figured out at like a 6 month to a year's, you know, sort of cadence. But all that stuff for example, in the white paper, it's like, it's more of a compass of like, okay, that's kind of where we want to go, but I don't know how it's going to materialize necessarily.
but like, so having participated in the game jam, did you walk away from it feeling like these guys, this is working, this is something that's good, that you're excited? I mean, obviously you're continuing to be part of it, but like, did that make you feel stronger about this idea that we're going to make this extensible universe that people can build things in? Or are you like, man, these guys are trying, but I don't know. Like, how confident were you, having gone through the hackathon process, that they're going to be able to deliver on any kind of level of this promise of an extensible universe?
If they just kept iterating on the game as it is now, I think the gameplay and sort of the idea of what this game is supposed to be, which is like a survival sandbox game, I think even if they don't sort of expand even further into the third-party stuff, then as long as that's good, there's probably going to be, players. But the real potential kind of lies with opening up more of those hooks to the outside world and letting people sort of plug into them. And I can give you an idea of why that would be cool to see. And again, this is sort of me just thinking, a couple of years ahead, like what would be possible if we had access to these certain things. So if you look at EVE Online, you have something like SRP, right? A lot of organizations, big and small, they sort of have an SRP system. A lot of them use something like an Alliance Auth, or maybe, I know FC has kind of developed their own version of it in recent years. But the majority still have an established process of like, this is how we kind of process a kill mail and do a payout.
Right.
Most of that process exists outside of the game by looking at a kill mail, and then the kill mail's value is sort of calculated based on market sort of pricing. What is that API called that does the price checks? Like, I can't, it's escaping me right
Well,
now.
there's different ways. Yeah, I mean, I usually do my price checks through something like Fuzzy Steve, who does his own like proxy copy of all of the data. But yeah, like you would use your APIs and stuff to kind of be like, or a lot of times the organization will just like set a thing, be like, okay, well, if you lose a basilisk, as long as it's fit to the correct fit, so you have an API check that like checks the kill, sees that your fit is correct, sees that you're authorized for the payout, and then just like gives the person, like the leader, the instructions to pay you out.
And that last step is sort of, where it's critical. It's like 99% of the process happens outside the game, and then someone still has to log in and sort of do that last couple steps.
Right.
The promise, or I think the potential for Frontier is, what if we can just allow you to do those last steps from outside of the game as well? What is the impact of that? And, if you can automate a lot of the administrative and busy work that players have to kind of do right now for organizations, and fully end-to-end, it's not even that an official necessarily has to be involved. Like, you can set up the logic and the rules exactly of like, this is how you check the fitting, like you mentioned, like, is it the correct fit? Depending on, certain like, some modules might have variations that are acceptable, as an example, or or penalties against bad fittings, and if you get penalized too much, then it doesn't pay out, or whatever the business rules, if I can call them that, would be for your sort of SRP system. You could automate that whole process where your member just goes up to a website or to a structure in the game. It opens a terminal. They automatically see their own like kill mail history. They click on one and says like, I want SRP for this, please. The thing processes the whole thing, and it just pays it out to them, or it gives them a replacement ship right there in the structure that they can then just pick up and take with them. I know some people have tried doing SRP that way, where they just have ships fitted, but it's such a menial task to like have a stockpile of ships available for people with contracts and all that stuff.
By the way, good luck, Starborn. Sorry, he just says he's autopiloting a hauler in low sec. All right.
Nice. So, but yeah. So what does the game change into when you can build these automated systems that support player activity in the background completely autonomously, that's sort of the thing that I'm interested in, and that could be fun. But as for like the the stuff in the white paper, that is not anything we can tangibly interact with right now. It's very much the devs pointing a direction, right?
Right.
So that's
again,
sort of.
I'm just asking you, as a person who's been in the thick of this more than pretty much any other player that I've encountered, do you believe in it? Do you think that do you think that that's where they're going, or do you think that this is just kind of a fun project?
If the game is fun, it'll have a player base. I think that is true of.
I mean, for sure. I mean, but they could just make it into EVE 2.0 or whatever, and it could still be fine. Yeah. But like this idea of the promise of like, well, FC could shut down and it would still just work because the client is open source and all the information is on there and all this. Do you even? I saw the look on your face. So there is some doubts to the fullness of this realization.
There's a combination of things when it comes to that stuff, right? It's like, you cannot fully decentralize the servers with the existing blockchain tech. There's latency,
too cumbersome
considerations. There's, the scale of things used to be a problem. Like you simply cannot pump all of New Eden, for example, or all of Tranquility through those systems fast enough. Like it would not be able to support it. So,
and furthermore,
in part, they are also betting on this technology improving over time. And, basically the long bet for them is like 10 years, 15 years down the road. It's like, we can now decentralize everything because the stuff has gotten fast enough, or, can handle this sort of scale of traffic and processing requirements.
Right. Well, so even in your example, right? So there's an SRP. The rules behind the SRP would be stored on the chain. But the transaction itself, the individual transaction of the person, of it going through the calculation and paying out the person, that may or may not be, that probably wouldn't be its own entry in a chain, right? Like that is a separate kind of data. There's the rules and then there's the logs.
Yeah, effectively. Well, you would. Let me think. If I had to build an SRP with the current things that we have, what would be the way to do that? So you would go up to the structure, you would interact with it. It'll show you a website in the game client. Like if you've played Frontier, like if you've interacted with storage units, it's sort of like that. You have a little browser window that pops up. It recognizes your character. It shows a bunch of stuff. So let's say you have a list of kill mails. You click on the one. It's like, okay, I want this one redeemed, please. What happens in that moment is your game client sends a request to the chain and says, redeem kill mail or something like that.
It makes a function call, basically. It's like, it goes to make the call, and here's the arguments, and it passes the information to it and receives a response.
And then all that stuff happens in the background. And then what would happen is those systems that we've built in the background would tell the storage unit, move this item from the group's vault into this person's personal storage, right? So that is the game. Like you can send instructions from outside of the game into the game and tell it to do things.
By
closing that loop makes it automated, basically, without a person having to log into the game and then physically move the item from the group storage into that person's hangar.
For sure. And that logic is the part that makes it a mod that isn't local but is, global. And so the logic being on the chain makes sense. But here's another good example. Yeah. So there's a rat, right? The stats of the rat could be on the chain. Right, so that way it just pulls from that whenever it needs information about the rat. It can pull the information from there, so that's why it's stored there. But the fact that there is a rat in that location is not something that's going to be just stored on the chain, because that's being updated all the time. And every time you shoot at that rat, the damage that's done, all that sort of stuff, that also wouldn't be stored in the chain. That's just a log of the event that has happened. So that's my biggest concern about this whole idea of like completely away from FC, where it's the idea that like, well, sure, you have the laws of the universe, but then there's the things that actually happen. And that is also important to be on a server. So at some point, like that's still going, like the actual running of the universe is likely going to need to be somewhere.
And that is exactly how it exists right now, right? So facts about the world, including how to perform actions, because that is technically like that's what the contracts is that we write, right? It's if you think about what the original purpose of this technology was, it was a ledger, which is just it's a log of transactions that happens, you know, person A, take it from this wallet, this amount, put it into that wallet. That's all it used to be. And then it evolved into what it is now, where it's, well, we can do the same thing, but with a function call, right? Like a function call is technically also, you have inputs, you have something is done to those inputs, and you have an output. And you can put that on the chain as well. So that's sort of how it exists. The nice thing about that as well is if I write this logic and I publish it, I don't have to then host anything for that logic to be available to the game servers, right? So that's also one of those nice perks of the benefit of the tech is like you publish once and it's like it's always there for the game to reach out to at any point in time.
Right, and that's the thing that I keep coming back to when I'm trying to like understand where we're going with all this, right? Because like, so as far as the promise goes, it should be like, okay, well, FC server shuts down or whatever. Like you just download the server client, the server information, and you start running your own server. In theory, that should actually not just be your own server. It is just the server because you're all pulling from the same collective information. That's not necessarily the case, obviously, because the actual like runtime of the environment is still being managed by a server. So in this case, like right now, if you were to do that, you would have two different servers with two different people actively connected to them and in different locations. But like if I put down a Stargate in one universe, it would automatically be put into the other universe because they're still pulling from the same backing data of that kind of stuff. Is that pretty much what would happen?
Yeah. So the way, and that's kind of where they are now with this, right?
Right.
You still have the same tech and server infrastructure and all that stuff that was inherited from EVE Online, and that's where the game kind of plays out, right? We still have, they've upped the tick rate to four ticks per second instead of 1. It's actually variable. They can ramp it up to 60 or 80 now if they want to. We'll see. Like that's the nice thing of the two games sharing this platform as well, is like some of that stuff can trickle over to EVE Online as well. But still,
that is actually really, really useful how these two different, like they can experiment with stuff in one to help out with the other in both directions, honestly.
Yeah, and it might not be obvious, but some stuff has already made it over between the two. I can give you one example that I'm pretty like 99% sure came from Frontier is the way they changed Plex. Because the markets in Frontier, before that release where they sort of consolidated Plex into a universal market, it used to be, well, that's how the markets work in Frontier. So they made that change in Frontier where all of the markets across all of the regions you could view from anywhere, and then not long after, behold, Plex now functions in that exact same way. So there's stuff like that where it's like you can see how they share things.
Sure, I very much agree. Like a lot of times we talk about the tech, right? Like the upgrade to Python, right? That we've talked about that as being like them working on it on Frontiers can be potentially useful for EVE Online as well. But what you're talking about also is like design stuff. There's so much stuff that is like a part of EVE, and I think back to like Blackout and really all of Scarcity, where it's like for years we argue about whether or not nullsec should have local, but we can argue about it in the abstract all we fucking want, and until they actually like do it, do we have any idea of what the real ramifications of it is? So in the same way, like whenever anybody says like, oh, we should just make it so ganking is no longer allowed in high sec. I can be like, have you seen Eve Echoes, right? Eve Echoes allows them to experiment with certain things, and we can see the practical effect of those decisions, not in the abstract. So in the same sort of way, like, they could experiment with something that wouldn't be acceptable on its face by EVE Online players, and then it just ends up being no problem at all, or even beneficial to EVE Frontiers. And so it's like, well, okay, turns out we don't need insurance, or, you know, whatever it is, right? Like, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Probably the biggest, like, there's a couple mechanics that if they ported them back to EVE Online, it just breaks the game entirely. Fuel might be one of those things, but I think people could adapt. It would be very annoying because it's very much something that's always on your mind when you're playing Frontier, in terms of, you know, how far can I go away from my safe spot and how can I get back, and sort of planning. There's a lot of like forward thinking of like, okay, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna do this, and then make my way back, you know, on half a tank or whatever. That's one of them. The other one that would just completely break the game is the ability to hit stuff in front of you. The name is escaping me right now. But basically
Collision?
blobbing doesn't exist in Frontier. If my ship fires at something that I'm looking at, if you get between us, I'm gonna hit you.
Yeah, like occlusion.
It's not obvious.
Occlusion.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
yeah.
And let me tell you, of all of my moments in EVE Frontiers, the thing that strikes me the most was I was fighting this rat in a area, and he was wailing on me. I'm using my afterburner, and I get behind a rock, and I realize that this rock is actually stopping him from shooting me. So I shut off my afterburner, so that way I drift a little bit slower past that rock just to kind of build up some stuff. And then right as I'm getting out from behind that rock, I hit my afterburner again and keep fighting. But it gave me just that little bit of reprieve, and I was like, this is so fucking good. Like, this was such a good moment within the gameplay. I would love to see that in EVE. But this goes back to like what Hilmar said back in like 2019, where he would also love to see, that's one of the things that he explicitly called out. But he was like, I don't know, like, we would have to have a separate area of EVE Online that followed that kind of rules, and then people would have to transport themselves there potentially. And I think that a lot of that ideas became EVE Frontiers. I think to CCP or FC, EVE Frontiers really represents their place to be able to do the things that they've wanted to do, but they can't do with EVE Online because EVE Online already isn't that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Funny enough, you mentioned that example of like ducking behind stuff. That is one cool thing that we've seen. The other thing that was really funny that we saw before, and this is somewhere on a stream that Jotun did ages ago, but there was a couple battleships. This was back in Cycle 3 or 4 when battleships still existed. But there was a bunch of battleships just kind of hanging out in front of a station. And then Rooks and Kings, which were active at the time, I don't know if they still pop in now and again with the game, but they were really active in the early days when the game was still under NDA. And they basically brought in a fleet of
back in the day, it was so centered around stations, like the actual, like, even though you had all the open world, all of your manufacturing, all of your control were based around these key stations. And that was a world that Rooks and Kings totally understood. So, and then now that they've shifted more to the production to like player built colonies or whatever you want to call it, probably has changed over who is trying to seek control and who is trying to make a name for themselves right now.
Yeah, you know, maybe their interests are somewhere else at the moment. But just to finish that up, there was basically a bunch of ships sitting there, and there was a ship in front and a bunch of battleships behind it. They warped in with a fleet and started shooting at the ship in front, but because the shots missed and occlusion and line of sight still worked, they killed the stuff in the background by accident. So,
That's
like,
so cool.
You don't just hit, you know, if you target a thing, it's not like your shots can go past and just vanish into thin air. They actually hit stuff in the background if your shots miss.
Yeah, you're actually shooting a thing. To Simon, yes, we're talking about the Rooks and Kings, especially during that like mid phase of Frontiers, when it first started being Frontiers and being open. They definitely made a big name for themselves for control. But again, Ocky and I don't 100% know how present they are at the exact moment, but who knows? They'll, as soon as there's something to compete over in it, I'm sure that they'll show back up.
Yeah, I mean, it depends if they're still interested or if they're doing something else. But no, it's Lord Meldror and his crew. They were quite a terror at the time in Frontier. So
speaking of interest, though, I just want to ask, how much do you play EVE Online now?
At the moment, I mostly just keep up with what's going on.
So you don't?
So I don't log in at all at the moment.
Okay.
No, all of my free time sort of just goes into this third-party ecosystem, right?
And that's what I really wanted to jump on, which is the idea that, like, so one of the things that I wrestle with EVE Online and EVE Frontiers is this idea that, like, in a sandbox game like this, like, the reason why I log in today and mine for 4 hours isn't necessarily because I wanted to mine, but because I need, like, I'm building up towards something. Every action that I take is building towards this, like, progress, and that's kind of the promise of the story of EVE Online. I like to say it's like a train set. It's a hobby that you work on and grow over the course of years. EVE Frontiers is wiped a lot, and so I've had a very, like, I'll dabble in it in a couple of days, but, like, to ask me to really, and I bought in some of the previous expansions or like previous cycles, we did like a couple of weeks where we would build up and get kind of higher and higher tier stuff, but, like, trying to keep doing that again and again has really, like, I can't get hooked into it, knowing that, like, oh yeah, I could put in all this, I'll check out all this stuff, but then as soon as it's like, and now go mine for a few hours, I'm like, and I don't need to do that. So what about this is so exciting and engaging to you that it's become like your primary thing?
A large part is, like, because of the cycles, because of the constant resetting of progress, the one place where you can make permanent progress is in the third-party stuff. You know, learning how the tech works, building foundational systems and ideas and things for people to use. And so that's been sort of a lot of the focus for, and also the group that I play with, that is sort of their thing, right? Like a lot, like Lacal that has built, you know, the mapping tool that you've looked at in the past. That screenshot you showed about the fitting, like that is a third-party fitting tool for, it's basically, you can think of it like the PIFA, like the beginnings of PIFA for Frontier.
Okay, for sure.
So, yeah, the people that I tend to hang around with are very interested in, like, what can we do with the game, you know, with what the game gives us at the moment. And so a lot of the engagement is around those sorts of things, much more so than the game itself. Because even myself, I would play for like 2, maybe 3 weeks at the start of the cycle, and then from there it's sort of you're coasting for the remainder of it, logging in, doing some event, you know, maybe someone wants to go and explore something or look at something, or they need a hand with building something, then, you know, you hop in and play a bit. But no, it is definitely one of the things a lot of people bring up constantly within the community, is like the resetting is killing it.
Right. It's hard to take it seriously until it doesn't reset anymore.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Also, I mean, it's an alpha, so, I mean, like, it's okay that people aren't necessarily taking it seriously in that sort of way. But I'm just saying, like, for me, it's been hard to take it that seriously. But for you, it's literally replaced EVE Online. So that, like, I would have expected you to maybe dabble with it for a little bit and then maybe hop back to EVE Online for a little bit. But no, you've completely stopped doing EVE Online and you're full all in on EVE Frontiers.
Yeah. And again, part of it is more so the community of it, right? Teaching people how to make stuff, right? So similar to, you know, for you, the side thing is streaming. For me, it's like guiding people and helping people make stuff and answering questions, and that probably like I mentioned, it probably ties into the Luminary thing of like I'm just very active in the builder section of the game.
That's true. Yeah. Since you're there's like you mentioned the streamer thing, like I have kind of two identities, right? I have my existence as a person that comments about EVE Online, but then I also have my character and place within EVE Online. And I keep those two things very separate about the way I think about things and talk about things. So in the same sort of way, like your progress in any given cycle doesn't really matter. You are a creator of frontiers. You're helping build this entire game. And so in that sense, there is no resets. There's just the progress. Each reset is its own experiment cycle.
Exactly. Yeah, basically. Right. They change things in the subsystems that we can interact with. They add to them. Also, most of the people in sort of that group that I tend to play with, they've made contributions to the world contracts as well. So we do talk to developers about the actual code that we eventually will have to sort of engage with. And they're always looking for like, sort of low-hanging fruit things of like, if there's one thing we can add to these things that would enable a bunch of new sort of ideas or functionality that you guys can then build, what would that be? And so those types of discussions with the devs directly also happen, not just on the Luminary side, but like in the builder community.
They are super active in the Discord, especially in the builder area of the Discord. I can vouch for that. So basically you have turrets, which can shoot things. You have gates, which can link between things and take people there. And you have containers that can accept and put out stuff. And those are kind of the three interface points that you can have as a game or as a developer. And you can create code and logic that kind of stitch these things all together and help affect their individual behaviors. But those are your core components. Those are the same core components that they've had for like a year, right? So like, do you think that are they giving you new things enough? Are they making progress? How do you feel about the progress that they have made since you've become really big into it? Do you feel it's slow paced, fast paced? Are you impressed? Are you disappointed?
So this is one of the things where it would be nice to be further along, but if you've been part of the journey, you understand why they're not. Because like as an example, so the world contracts is the thing where sort of the parts that exist on chain outside of the game server, that is where they are defined, and the things that you can do and interact with. That is probably going through iteration 5 at this point. And some of the reasoning behind that is, for example, we had World v0 over on the Ethereum version of the game, and then they learned a bunch of things from that version, which led to version 1, and that was about 6 months, and then from version 1 they learned a bunch of things again, which led to, I think there was a version 2 on Ethereum, but then they also realized like this whole way of building things is very awkward and very difficult to extend, and like there's a bunch of security risks and issues with it. And so then they moved over to SUI, which was basically restarting again from zero. Like we're back to World v0. And now they've learned a bunch of things working with SUI for the first time, which is now leading to World v1. So it is true that like we've been stuck at sort of the same level of functionality for like a year and a half. But it's also true that they've not done nothing. Like it's been an extremely arduous path to get to where they are now.
That's absolutely fair. And so, I always say development takes way longer and way more effort than most people give credit for. I guess, so again, you've been part of this more than almost anybody else. So just on a scale like 1 to 10, real reductionary, what score do you give FC right now? Because like, again, they're huge promises. Are they actually going to be able to obtain any of it? And, CCP loves to take big swings, and they have pulled off some crazy shit, but they have also shot themselves in the foot on numerous occasions too. On a scale of 1 to 10, what grade or what rank would you give the FC team working on Frontiers right now?
It depends on, like, overall, probably somewhere around a 6.
Okay.
Right? Maybe a 7 on a good day.
So you're not like, these guys are geniuses, but, you know, they're doing what needs to happen and they're plodding along.
Yeah, it is... The main problem with this is that it's so much more than just making a game. Right? It's basically rebuilding the equivalent of EVE Online back when that started, plus this whole like ecosystem on the side with the chain stuff, plus a wallet that can then do the things that they need to do it for, you know, like the scope of what they're doing and sort of the cross-cutting disciplines that's necessary to pull it off is so much more than most video games, which you can argue is like, you guys are biting off more than you can chew, sort of thing.
That's what they do, though.
But,
like I said, like CCP does not take on logical, good, easy projects. They're always attempting to do the impossible.
Yeah, exactly. So they get a lot of shit for trying stuff and then failing. You can call it, I guess, most of the projects. I don't know if all of them have been like outright, these things just didn't work out properly. I think the vampire games was probably the worst of it. But the other ones, they've probably learned what they wanted to learn, or, you know, they got to a point where it's like, okay, we see where we wanted to go with this, and either the industry's not ready or the market's not ready. Like the VR stuff they did before, right?
Right.
It's like,
yeah.
The hardware itself just didn't take off, and so it doesn't matter if they made the best VR game that exists under the sun. If people don't buy VR gear, it's irrelevant.
I mean, it'd be really helpful to let people know when you make your game non-VR compatible and actually like tell people about it, so that way people actually can get the game. I will never forgive them for that.
It's true.
People,
and then there's also strange decisions, like the way Dust was handled was also odd, with like building it on PS3, and then the PS4 came out not too long after that, and so
I was tuned in enough on that development, though, to kind of understand the sequence of events that kind of boxed them into a corner for that. It wasn't like it was their choice to do that per se. That's a long story in and of itself. But to try to recenter this back onto EVE Frontiers, though, who would you recommend check out EVE Frontiers right now?
For this current cycle, like, so one thing I will mention is, like, they did introduce this evergreen, 5-day free trial. So if people want to see like where this thing is now, you could do that. And I mean, you can make as many, free accounts as you want going forward. But the crowd that I think gets the most value out of this at the moment is probably the guys interested in third-party dev. I mean, there's a lot of bias there in me saying that, but just because of the way, like, how frequently things can change with the game, and like the whole cycle thing at the moment is very difficult to deal with. Some people don't like it.
Though, like, with only guns, gates, and boxes, like, how exciting is it to do stuff in the game? Like, how do you keep on finding things to do in it? Like, why is it not just like a weekend curiosity that you just shrug and go, oh, that was cool, and then like come and check it out a year later?
Mostly because the stuff that's interesting exists outside of those sort of interfaces. And also you can combine them, right? So if I put something in the box, it allows me to go through the gate. And so you can start doing, interesting things. But as an example, the stuff that keeps most guys busy at the moment, one project I can highlight would be something like Trinary Exchange, which is effectively the equivalent of EVE's marketplace. Well, the NPC markets, right? It's a system
Right.
like that is like fully buy sell pricing. And how do you build a system like that where the markets are controlled by players? They're decentralized. They need to be hidden, but also be exposed to the right people at the right time.
Right. It
If
goes
they,
back to those three
have
things of IT, right? How do you make sure that the data's integrity? How do you make
yeah,
sure that the communications integrity is maintained? But also, how do you maintain accessibility, right? You can lock
yeah,
up everything, but if nobody can access it, then it doesn't do anybody any good. So you have to handle those three pillars in any kind of IT security situation. And this is just another one of those, for sure.
yeah. So at that point, you've sort of wandered so far away from playing the game that you're just building IT systems.
Well, what are you working on right now, for example?
The stuff that so the first thing I built, I could probably throw up, like I have a million.
Well, I mean, like, what are you working on right now? Are you working on anything in particular right now?
The main thing that I've built since the move to SUI has been an
Mm-hmm.
indexer. To explain sort of what that is it's a thing that monitors the chain and allows you to basically have all of the game's information in a neatly organized, like a traditional relational database, right? And so that's a very low level thing that you would then build other things on top of. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the thing that I finished initially. The thing that I'm working on at the moment is we do have a ESI equivalent, but it's extremely basic. It's mostly meant to give you dynamic information, such as tribes. Like whenever new tribes register on the system, there's a API endpoint you can call, and it's like, here's all the tribes in the game and their name and their description and all that stuff. I'm basically building a thing that puts that stuff on chain so that it's also available there to do things with. As a simple example, the stuff I tend to build is like the building blocks that other people would use to then build their stuff with.
I'm sorry. I need to make sure I understand what you just said. Okay. So right now, when a person registers a new tribe, it's just like
Mm-hmm.
EVE Online, where like there's a new corporation or whatever, right?
Yep.
And so it's just like a normal database, everything's normal world, same exact as EVE. But there's an API for that, so you can pull that information. And so you've built a go-between that effectively scrapes the API, but then posts it on SUI in a
Yep.
way that is then accessible within what? What does that get you?
So why would I want to have that information on chain instead of just using an API? The main reason they would want so that on-chain logic that we talked about earlier of like I want to make decisions about different tribes or different groups or those sorts of things. In order for you to use any of those things in your logic, it has to be accessible, on chain itself. And so
Right.
there needs
Okay.
to be a way to put that information in a place that makes it available to your logic.
So if your turret wants to access that information, it can't access it via the API. It has to be on chain. So you're creating a structured way to make sure that data is on chain, so that way the tools that use the chain can access that data as well. And then this is the reason why I hooked into this, because this really does feel like more than just the boxes and the turrets and stuff. This is you building more of the game. FC has not put in this capability of accessing new corporations as part of the system, and so you've actually created an interface for it, and now anyone can now utilize that data, and you're just the guy that have now built the thing that takes it from being an old school database to parsed into tokenized, structured, accessible data. Is that
assuming
roughly it?
That is the basic idea, yes, but there is an element of trust, right? Because I'm the in between, you have to trust that I'm not tampering with any of that stuff as well. And so people tend to build at least deploy their own versions of these things, similar to what people tend to do with like Alliance Auth. Right, it's very rare that one alliance would use Alliance Auth on someone else's infrastructure or servers or things, just because of trust. And so it's the same thing here. Is there's an element of like, as a builder, I am also trying to sort of cultivate a reputation of trust with other builders. Of like, this guy is doing things that benefits us and we can rely on them and their stuff is not like tampered with. But as you know, as groups start to take shape, they also want security. And so like even something like EFMap that I know you've pulled it up on stream before, so I'm assuming you've used it at times. You know, the guy that makes that belongs to a certain group, so there is a degree of optics there of like, can we trust this tool? Is it always going to be available to us? What happens if we end up in a war against this guy?
Well,
right,
a good example
sort
of this from Eve is actually there was the like DScan parser. So you could go to a website and paste your DScan and it'll like break down all the information and all that sort of stuff. But then I can't remember exactly which one it was, but there was one of them that ended up being revealed that it was actually one of the Alliance's like Intel tools. So as everyone is posting into it in order to create their shareable links, they're also providing all of that data to the home system. And there has been actually rules about like what can be done with ESI tools now involving that kind of stuff, because I think largely because of that. But you know, it is definitely a concern. But like, if you created a parser, you could theoretically open source the parser, so then people could just see that, oh yeah, I'm not doing anything with it, and it's just it's running.
Yes.
And then
so
then you just have the data. People can just see that the data is there, right?
Yeah, and this is sort of the stuff that but besides just building stuff for the game, these are the things that we as builders also have to kind of contend with in the ecosystem as a whole, of like, how do we develop that trust between the stuff that people make? Because in the future, this stuff could directly control your assets and your infrastructure, and like, and so, like, how do we keep bad actors in check? Because for us as people that want to build, you know, a third-party community and ecosystem, our incentives are aligned with the average player, in that we want to build stuff that is useful, and we want the average player to trust that this stuff is not malicious in any way and you know, is going to do bad stuff. And like, because as they hand off more control to the third-party ecosystem, emptying out someone's hangar, it starts to become a reality that could happen, right? You can do that stuff in game right now with EVE Online, but if it's possible from outside of the game, then that's a whole new problem that starts to creep in. And so, like, developing tools and ways of vetting things that people build is also the type of stuff that we have to start thinking about and ourselves busy with. So it's not so much just, it's not that we're just playing with the building blocks in the game. It's like, it's much broader than that, of like, how do we build resilient systems that manages sort of long-term organizations and player groups and, you know, things like that.
Yeah, and the thing I like about this is that it's such a reflection of the broader world, right? It reminds me of, like, in EVE Online, I like to say that the skills that make you good at EVE Online are not the skills that make you good at other video games, which is one of the difficulties about getting into EVE Online. It's a totally different skill set, but at the same time, the skills that you develop in EVE Online are real life skills. They extend outside of EVE Online. So in the same sort of way, like, so much of like real challenges of human interaction and economics and stuff gets reflected in EVE Online. And so too, like, especially right now in the world, with AI and with everything else going on with powers that be within the world, this concern about open source versus not open source, where do we get to trust? Open source has brought us so far as developers, as a world, and it's currently under attack. And
yep.
So, like, again, sci-fi is such a great microcosm for us to explore real issues, right? Like, it's just a video game. It's just a sci-fi universe or whatever. None of it matters. It all gets wiped. But yet, these exact same questions about trust, about open source, about tools being available and therefore powerful for people versus being able to be the source of corruption or disruption, like these are the fundamental issues that we are wrestling as a species, not just as a bunch of EVE Online players. Yeah, super cool. So from an outsider, it seems like the dev community around Frontier has been, like, honestly one of the best pieces of it all. I don't know if it's because of the fact that it came from crypto or whatever, but like the community that has surrounded around EVE Frontiers is different than EVE Online's community. And every time I look in, everybody's being very positive and very collaborative. How have you felt overall with the EVE Frontier, working with the EVE Frontier community, and how does it differ in your experience from EVE Online community?
Yeah, because it's so small. So speaking about like the builders specifically, it's always been just very positive. I dread the day when when the bad actors start showing up that are like trying.
Yeah,
to
as soon as it becomes
and...
advantageous to subvert the system, then a lot of these like happy fun time flowers and whatnot and rainbows fall apart. I do want to address some of this people in chat just real quick because we are pretty. Thank you so much for hanging out for so long. This has gone a lot longer than I thought it was, but it's so much interesting stuff to dig into. So, you know, obviously I've followed EVE Frontiers since before it was even called EVE Frontiers, and, you know, we've shown it off before, but I've had a difficulty fully penetrating it. You guys want me to put EVE into context for my fellow Empyreans, and I'm trying to do that, and I've tried to do that with Frontiers as well. So Ocky here is, like, by far the real deal. He is, like he mentioned earlier, he won the hackathon for one of the previous hackathons for EVE Frontiers. He's on the he was one of the original. Are you still on the Luminary project or Luminary program?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they opened up the new term, when was it? Start of July, and it ran for July. So I did apply for the second round. They've yet to kind of go through all the applications and sort of decide on the next group. But as of now, I'm still in the first round group, yeah.
So if you want to know whether or not Ocky knows what he's talking about when it comes to EVE Frontiers, FC has decided that he's one of the 8 people that they want to talk to the most. So to that end, I'm interested to hear what he has to say about all this and digging through all this. So I know some of this is a little bit too technical for some people. If so, I apologize. I just posted a 2-hour drama video this week, so you can go check that out if you want to. But I'm so interested in actually getting my head around what is happening here with EVE Frontiers. It's not ignorable, right? There's so much people in EVE Online, the EVE Online world, that's trying to be dismissive of it, trying to be shit on it. And you know what? It is doing very, very well in spite of that, all things considered, considering the fact that it's an alpha, considering it still has wipes and everything. It has actually maintained and grown its own world. And so, like, of players and all that stuff. Like I said, there's a difference between the two different communities. So let's return back to a little bit of that question. But, like, I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page of why we're having this conversation and what's going on, as we're now like an hour and a half plus into it. But, like, so I'm sorry, let's go back. How do you feel about the difference between the EVE Frontiers community and, like, the EVE Online community, having experienced both?
The main challenge, I would say, well, just to continue on sort of where I left off. So the builder side of things has just been very collaborative. There are some guys that sort of do their own thing in private, but most of the ones that are part of the sort of broader conversation of building the community and the ecosystem, as you know, it's been nothing but great, because a lot of them come from software dev, and so, you know, you kind of need those skills if you're working with other people that do that stuff. And so,
yeah, because it's not just development, but there is a whole bunch of layers of, like, further understanding. Like, I'm a developer, I have a decade of development, and yet I couldn't just jump into it. I'd like to understand how to integrate with the chain and how all the different pieces work. Like,
You
I would
can
still
either
need somebody to get me up to speed. It's all Greek.
you could wrestle with that stuff yourself, right? Or you can just ask there, and then people will start to help out and guide you and like, look at this. Here's an example of how to do the thing that you're looking for at the moment. But so yeah, that side of things has been really positive. The community as a whole, because it's very small, as it is right, at the moment, because it is still alpha, and part of it is alpha, part of it is just the wiping. Also, there's a lot of people that they're on the sideline right now. It's like, okay, I'll check this out when the wiping ends eventually.
Yep.
So as you sort of cut out certain groups, the ones that are left are very positive, but they're also extremely vocal and critical about like what the game is, where it's going. Which is that is critical and important. So the other thing is the vocal crowd also tends to they have their thing that they focus on, and so sometimes it's the same in Eve. Like
for sure.
What nullsec wants is not the same thing as what wormholes want, is not the same as what lowsec wants, right? So you have people that they have their thing and their group that their avenues that they advocate for, and having discussions in both ways is the stuff that kind of informs the devs the most. And so just having people keep talking about ideas and like putting an idea forward, and then someone else comes like, no, that's not going to work, and these are the reasons why, and then they push back, like just having that back and forth, even if it's, sometimes it can get a little heated and people start to get maybe even personal, which is the sort of the worst way things can end. But even if it gets a little like adversarial and then like heated, that's fine as long as the ideas get, evaluated out and sort of hashed out between the community, because that's the stuff that the devs like. If we don't question ideas or feedback within the community, that means the devs then have to do that legwork themselves, and they might miss stuff in the process, right? And so just having a lot of people talk about stuff makes it very helpful. So that's the biggest difference at the moment, at least, because so much of the game can just be changed and thrown away and altered. People are much more bold in the type of stuff that they suggest. Right. Whereas because EVE Online is so established and so big, it's very hard for one group to sort of comment on what happens in a different part of space, and for that to be, a very useful and meaningful sort of. It's always, unless you've been there and you've played in that part of space for a long time, it's hard to comment on what is best for that or how you would want it to be changed or that sort of thing. So that's sort of the biggest difference. Is you can have an opinion about most of sort of everything that is going on in Frontier because it's still small, whereas in EVE it's a lot harder to have that sort of broad view across the whole game.
So, okay, but when EVE Frontiers was first announced, when it was still Project Awakening, and the earlier you go, the more you see them focus on the idea of like it being a blockchain game, it being a crypto game. And I think that it's very safe to say and fair to say that FC has done everything within their power to kind of get it as far away from that association as they can. You can play the game and not even know that your experience, like that's how the game works at the moment, and I think that they're pretty happy about that. But also, as I said, EVE Frontiers has been very, very lively. If you go look at the subreddits, like its numbers are good. It's the number of people that are in their Discord versus even the EVE Online official Discord is incredibly impressive. And at the same time, within their EVE Discord, you see things like that you would normally see in like crypto spaces, like the whole like good morning, like they have all these weird rituals within the crypto bro space. And so there's this, that whole libertarian crypto, we're building our own like home out where nobody's rules besides our own applies.
Screw the government type thing.
Exactly. That like Eve Frontiers absolutely keys in on. But my question is that over time, has that audience shifted at all? Because like I've seen a lot of rejection from EVE Online players, so we don't see a lot of conversion from EVE Online to EVE Frontiers. We see some, but it feels like they're pulling a lot of their audience from that other side and bringing them here. Do you feel like that crypto bro aesthetic vibe is still like integral to the community, or have they moved away from that?
I think
I want to be clear. I'm not saying crypto bro in like a negative way. If you're like, I'm using it as a classification.
Don't worry. There's a lot
before Chad freaks out at me.
Like you veterans. Oh no, I mean, don't feel bad about it. We often like bash heads with that crowd as well, because you have the people like there's primarily two crowds in the community, right? There's the people that come from gaming because they've played games. They've either played EVE Online or other MMOs or whatever their background is, and they're interested in the gameplay and like having a good experience. And then you have the guys that come from that world, like the crypto side of things, and their main interest is like the play to earn type thing to a large degree.
Right.
Of like, can this be the thing that I can play all day and like make money off of? I think that side has sort of faded over time as the hype has died down. Like when it was initially announced, like back in 2024 and then I'd say early 2025, a lot of that crowd did show up because they were like, it's going to be the best thing that's ever happened for this ecosystem type deal.
Right.
But because of how long because of how long this thing has taken, they've kind of just moved on to the next sort of headline thing that has popped up. So I do suspect, for example, as soon as this goes from a testing environment to a sort of the real deal chain thing, that they will make their reappearances again.
Yeah, I think to them it's mostly like, if we can make the idea of blockchain, the more we can promote that, the better it is for all of them. So they're more interested of it as a point of advocacy for the tech rather than the thing itself. And so as it isn't a realized version of that yet, it's very much like again, like, I mean, I've said it flippantly, but like, is this good for Bitcoin is like literally a big piece of their philosophy. It's why they originally put $40 million or whatever it was into this project, in order to hope that Frontiers eventually justifies the tech. That's a big component to all of this.
So I don't keep track of that side of things too much. Like I mentioned, my background came from like playing games and traditional software dev, and then I sort of just stumbled in. Like my interest in crypto extends as far as it relates to Frontier, right? And not really beyond that. And even that's sort of the case for a lot of the people playing the game. And it's also the messaging we give the devs in a lot of cases of like, if this stuff is visible in the game at any point, and it feels like you're performing transactions, then there's still work to do. Like you have to hide this stuff better, or not hide is not the right word. It's like it needs to be integrated in such a way that you shouldn't have to care what it, how it's being done under the hood, that sort of thing, right?
Right. If it's properly modular, then it should be able to just swap out components for a different kind of component, as long as it's just like what you're saying with the programming, right? As long as you know what information is going to be sent to you, accessible, and you know what kind of thing it's expecting, everything that happens in the middle, doesn't matter if you program it in Java, you make one module, you could swap it out with a different thing, you could change it to SUI, you could change it to whatever. Like that's how programming works. It's like, as long as you know what data is coming in and how to format the data going out, you can replace the chunk that's managing that.
Yeah. Like if the experience, I mean, Eve is sort of the bar to try and match, right? Your experience right now when it comes to buying Plex, for example, if they swapped the underlying sort of way that is done for a blockchain and you couldn't notice, like that is the bar to hit. It's like the front end user should not even know what the back end tech is used, or how what it is. And so that is the bar that we push for as well, of like, we understand this thing needs to exist on this ecosystem, and that the ecosystem, you know, the people that have built the infrastructure want use cases for that infrastructure, which is the blockchain guys. And which is why that's why they're investing in these sorts of projects. It's like, we've built the highway. We need people to drive on it now, right? It's like
yeah. Exactly. It's like anything that proves that it's a valid tech.
Yeah, and so now we're going to start investing in car companies because we need people that can drive on this thing.
For sure.
But if your car sucks and it's not as good as, you know, the equivalent here would be EVE Online. It's like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Like, you still have to make good cars, which is good games. And so, yeah, this is sort of meandering off again into something completely different, but to answer the original question, I do think that aesthetic of like the crypto bro thing has faded over time, and the people that are mostly engaged right now is either the guys that are doing the third-party dev stuff and just treating it as like, this is a technology similar to an API or a database or any other thing, and then also the people that want to make it a good game. Like, they're engaged because they're constantly playing and giving feedback on what is there to play. Despite the cycles, there is still a crowd of folks that are competing, you know, for like achievements and leaderboards and sort of progression. There is a sort of meta progression thing that exists where it's not achievements, it's like quests. Like, you do.
There's like a meta point. You do things in each cycle, and that becomes like a meta score. I think it's grace or whatever. Might mean something later on.
And there is leaderboards and stuff like that, so there is a community that's, you know, they just like number go up.
I mean, that's fair. Okay, so speaking of it, so we've been talking now for 2 hours, so we might as well talk about the actual game itself. Like, when it first came out, when I played it, which was while it was still like under NDA, I think I won't get in trouble for this. Who knows? Nobody gets banned. No streamers get banned anymore. No, but like in the original cycles, it was just EVE. I was in an Amarr Corvette. I was in an Amarr station. It felt very much just like a new version of EVE. And one of the things I find really interesting about a lot of the development of EVE Frontiers, especially since they started with the core engine, is that so much of the development of EVE Frontiers has been about taking away things. You know? Like, we used to have an overview. We used to have other, like, how much of EVE Online can we take away from EVE Online and have it still be EVE Online, so that way we can put in new things to make it work differently, right? And that, in my opinion, has really defined the cycles up until really the previous one, where they start to put in like the new exploration stuff. That's the first, like, that's when they've taken away the stuff. They took away our ability to see something far away, but now they've also added in new ability for us to search for stuff with, you know, instead of a D-scan or whatever. And then, of course, this expansion, this cycle, has been, I think, probably one of the most dramatically different changes of form. To go from every ship is a ship that you mine the resources for to be able to get it and build it. It's very, like, conceptually very logical for an EVE player. But now, you know, they used to be all in stations. Now it's all done in player-built stuff. But now they've like, okay, well, guess what? There are no stable ships. Are there any stable ships? Like full package ships?
So, you know, for the first 4 cycles of Founder Access, like you mentioned, the game was very much still, like, a lot of systems was still just placeholders that were kept in from EVE Online. And I mean, this is communicated by the devs quite often, of like, if it's not been reworked or touched, it's probably going to change in some drastic fashion. But then, so yeah, for about 4 cycles, we had like frigates, we had cruisers, we had battle cruisers, Yeah. So you're pulling up the timeline there.
Yeah.
So about from cycle 1 to about 4, even into 5 to a large extent, we had a progression through the ship chain of like you can get all the way up from, you start with a Corvette. I don't think Corvettes are a thing in EVE Online. Maybe just the shuttles, I think, is classified
The
as
Corvette.
one.
Corvette's just the rookie ship. They renamed rookie ships to Corvettes.
Yeah. Okay.
So like your starter ship that you can get for free in any station by clicking a button.
Yeah. So we similar here. You would start with Corvettes, go through frigates, cruisers, battle cruisers, and I think we had one or they removed battleships in like cycle 3, I think. But yeah, they've slowly been trimming things back to rework them. And then this cycle, we've started with a single ship. Like there's no ship progression at the moment because they've basically taken the old way of doing things and just set it aside of like, okay, every ship is now going to be just a pile of pieces that you can stitch together. And so
I got a phone call. Hold on. You keep talking.
Yeah, all good. And yeah, so everything has been kind of entirely reworked. Yeah. Yeah. So from cycle 1 to 5, the game felt very much EVE Online. But with this cycle, it's the first time where they've completely ripped out the fitting. Like we still had modules and the way you fit ships now in EVE Online. We had high slots, medium slots, low slots, all that. That has been completely stripped out. You now have this little Tetris game where every module also has a shape, right? Like a 2x2 square or a 3x3 square, and you have to sort of Tetris these things into your different ship pieces. And so, yeah, it's to a large degree, the game now feels very different than it used to feel. Add to that manual firing, right? So the way guns work in EVE Online, you lock a target, you push a button, and then it cycles. With Frontier now, everything is manual aim, including mining, including combat, all that stuff. You have to physically move your mouse and shoot at the thing. Any restrictions on that module design concept? So there are some restrictions. We don't know how many of them are temporary. So for example, right now your ship can only have one turret hardpoint, but that is just a limitation of they've not added the support for you to have multiple guns and control multiple guns with manual aiming. So once that sort of stuff starts to come into the game, you can add things. Yeah, so it's basically it's T3 ships, but you can take it even further than T3, because with T3 you have subsystems that are specific to the hull. You can imagine a version where you can take any subsystem and put it on any hull.
It really does remind me of like Starfield or No Man's Sky Corvette stuff, right?
Yeah. Like you can look at other games to have an idea.
So I'm not gonna lie. Like this has been the first cycle that like the change was enough that I was like, I don't even want to. I haven't even played it all this cycle. I didn't do a preview of a couple like I have done with the previous cycles because it seemed like a lot. So as somebody who's doing it, how's it going? How this is a huge change. It is a fundamental change. Like it's one of those things that when they talked about modular ship design, I pegged it as one of those things that they keep talking about. That's like pie in the sky. We'll see if we ever get there kind of stuff. And then the next patch, they're like, guess what? Old ships are gone. How has that been going this cycle?
So it's they're phasing it in. So this cycle has been extremely light in terms of content, right? Like you can imagine if there's no ship progression, how much is there really to do in the game? Like I mentioned, a lot of the guys that are very like time-wise active is the ones doing the leaderboard stuff. But for everybody else, they played like a week, maybe 2, and they're like, okay, we need new stuff. And to FC's credit, they spent the summer vacation, which is a slow period of time for them. Even in EVE Online, it's like a very slow time of year.
Right.
They released new like modules every week during this vacation period. which was kind of a surprising thing given how slow the progress was before that. But yeah, so the modularity is coming out in like sort of two phases. The first phase was the fitting thing that you already showed, which is the little Tetris block thing. So currently we only have the one ship. It's still like a sort of pre-made hull that you can't really tear into pieces. The next phase of that sort of development is going to be as like, okay, all of those little pieces you see, you can now sort of mix and match different pieces from different ships. So what they're basically doing is they're taking all of the old ships that we used to know, and they're chopping them up and then adding one ship's pieces at a time for people to play with. So it's very much an exercise of conversion for the next like 1 or 2 cycles of like, okay, we still like the way the old ships looked, and we still want people to be able to build those exact sort of combinations of pieces, but they need to exist in this broader design of like, you should still be able to just throw together whatever you want as an option.
So,
but yeah, this cycle has been really slow, and the content has been pretty thin. I'm not gonna pull punches there. It is probably the cycle that has seen some of the lower engagement out of the cycles, specifically because there's so little in it.
Well, because I mean, again, it's a step back instead of a step forward in a lot of ways, at least as far as like content to experience goes. Technologically, obviously, it's probably a pretty big step forward. But so I guess
a big technical lift.
This goes back to that original, like that main question that I have for you through this whole thing, which is that do you think that they're going in the right direction? Right? So many things they've taken away stuff from Eve and they've added in new stuff, the whole dark forest stuff, the discovery systems that they've added in, the heat systems that they've added in, the fact that they're switching over from pre-built modules or pre-built stuff that you mine towards and build towards because you understand it to 100% this modular stuff. Do you honestly feel like they're going in the right direction, or do you feel like we're like some of these steps are missteps?
The modularity itself is probably the thing that is going to distinguish this game the most and make it sort of feel, because it's not just ships, it's going to extend to like bases and stuff as well. So instead of building like discrete structures, like I know this is something that they wanted to do in EVE Online as well ages ago, but there was like technical challenges with it, where before they did citadels, they wanted to build like modular stations.
Yep, I remember there was the whole thing about, so they wanted to make modular passes, and then FC even came out with the whole thing, or well, CCP was like, yeah, we looked into doing modular passes and we realized that it would be like an entire expansion's worth of effort and help like 2% of the population, so we've decided to not do modular passes. And then of course a couple of years later, due to feature accretion, it becomes citadels instead, and that becomes their new solution. But the original idea was this idea of like modular passes where you keep adding more and more passes for more and more things and different stuff. So yes, this definitely like goes back to that original. Again, so much of Frontiers is like the original dreams that FC had about things that they're like taking a second stab at.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the modularity thing, I think, is the thing that will, if it's done well, it'll make or break the game, really. Because so much of the design is going to be like sort of focused around how they execute on that.
For sure. And that thing, so like the other piece that a lot of people don't know is that there's this weird progression thing too, where you do stuff and then that gives you experience, and then you can lock those down in order to get these special items that you can equip to give you boosts, right? So you might mine a whole bunch and then turn that into a mining crown, and now you can wear that when you're mining, and you can like, so there's multiple ways of like developing your performance, not just getting better ships, but also developing better crowns for different situations. You said that ultimately what's going to be important about this game is whether or not it's fun. Do you think that this system of progression that they're working towards is fun? Is people engaging with it? Is it an interesting system of progression, and does it make a good game?
That is still a question. Like, one of the main points of pushback that the community, even in the early days, had, like, as people came in that used to be EVE Online players even, they talked about passive skill gain, right? It's like, this system is the one thing that we dislike the most. And so I do think they're looking at, like, can we move away from that to a large degree and at least make it, like, effort-based, but also allow avenues the same way that, like, injectors and stuff allow avenues for people to kind of catch up or, like, specialize quicker. And so they've landed on this, you know, the memories system that you're describing. So for those that are sort of not familiar with how it works, you kind of briefly described it, but you can think of it like an Elder Scrolls game, right? The more you use a skill, you kind of level up that skill. It's similar to that, but the difference is that the skill itself is something you discover, right? So you can discover Gallente Carrier 5 as while doing an activity. It's like there's a chance to give you that specific capability. You can then save those things. So yeah, you've described this in the past, but for the sake of the stream, I'll quickly go over how this works. So you have you as the player, which is called the self. It is like that is your consciousness or whatever you want to think about it. Yeah, your infomorph. And you then control shells, which is the equivalent of a clone. The way it works with Frontier is that clone goes out into the world. It is your physical manifestation, and it experiences things, and it gains memories. And you then take those memories, and you can save them by sacrificing that specific clone. You can save them into your infomorph, which has a limited capacity. So this is the first big difference from EVE Online, is you cannot be the best at everything all the time, which is a problem that I think has started to creep into EVE Online over time, as the game has been running for 20 years. It's like people have perfect skills, especially in things like industry and manufacturing. It's very hard to compete when people just they're the best at everything that you could possibly be.
Yeah, when we talk about EVE Online, especially when we talk about new players joining in, it's like, oh, well, how do I compete with these players with all this years of experience and all that stuff? And I always say, like, on any given task, it's actually not too hard to get the skill points to be on par with a person. Yeah. What an experienced player has is versatility, right? Yeah, you can be as good of a frigate pilot as I am within a month or two, but I also am a Logi pilot and a carrier pilot and an industry. You know what I mean? Like it's the broadness of my capabilities that makes me so strong, not my effectiveness at any given one task.
Yeah, and so part of what the system is trying to do, at least this is my interpretation, right, of where this is heading, is to force you to only use those specializations, and for those skills and things to sort of manifest in the world, right? You have a hangar of implants or a hangar of clones that you have to grow and maintain and sort of cultivate into these different, like, if you want to be versatile, there is risk in doing that because those options exist as like a physical thing in the universe. But you can also share those things with other people, right? Like you can sell your clones or you can sell your memories to someone else. So you can kind of become a clone merchant if you have like this catalog of like, this is a miner that is specialized in this specific task for these types of ships with this specific environment in mind, because that's also a big element with Frontier is the environmental effects. You know, even today we got some previews of what's coming next week, and they're starting to play around with things like if you get too close to rifts, you can take like environmental damage in the form of desync, I think they called it. And so, yeah, operating in hot environments, cold environments, hostile environments, like all those things are going to sort of play into how you define or sort of spec your characters, spec your ship. And that's where the modularity of the ships also start to come in. It's like an optimized miner for something like, or a very hot environment or a very like hazardous environment might look completely different than a ship that operates in like a very cold place. And instead of having, in EVE Online, you have very like specialized ships for every role because there's just so many of them at this point that you kind of have to go down that path. Whereas in this case, it's just one system, and you kind of have to Lego together the thing that works for your specific use case. And so that's kind of what I mean when I say like how they execute on modularity is sort of it's the linchpin in this entire thing, because everything going forward is going to be sort of informed by the design of that and the capabilities of like the different ship combinations you can put together. So yeah.
Well, very cool. I think that gives us a pretty good idea of where we're at. Obviously, we're kind of talking about this when we're really in the middle of some pretty big transitions, so we can only talk about most of what we're talking about is like what once was, and also where they're going. So I would love to have you come back, maybe at least once a cycle to talk about your thoughts about like how things are going, so that way it's not just me, an outsider. But while we're here, first of all, actually, I do want to question, like, as a luminary, how is that project going? You said that, like, so you got chosen, and there's something about like they're getting to the next step. I mentioned before, like CPM, but none of the other programs ever quite got to the full sophistication that the CSM is. And even with the CSM, there were years of them like struggling to figure out where their place in the whole thing is. As a member of the Luminary program, what do you think about the Luminary program?
In general, like the experience of it has been it's been positive. Otherwise, I mean, obviously they're continuing with it, so I think it's been useful to them. It's not the same scope and obviously that it is for for EVE Online. Like you mentioned before with the CSM, like they get flown out for a whole week, and it's like it's this marathon of like 8-day, full days for a whole week of going through the game and talking about different aspects.
Well, are you under NDA?
Yes.
Okay, so you do get to see things that haven't been that's still protected and all that stuff. So you have all of that. You've got the access of a CSM, but not the big formal come out the Iceland meetings.
So we do have. There's a blog post about it if you want to look at it at some point in time. But they went sort of over what exactly the luminaries do, and the main thing is called the Conclave, which is effectively the CSM Summit equivalent, where once a quarter, about every 3 months or so, they will have us sit down in a session for about 6 hours, and sort of, go through the stuff that they want to talk about. And very much like the same thing, the same way the CSM operates. The devs prepare a bunch of stuff, and then also the CSM brings a bunch of stuff to the table, and then they just kind of go through the feedback process of all that. So it's been sort of the similar experience, but on a very smaller scale compared to EVE Online.
So again, just like raw random scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your experience or the effect, like the value of the Luminary system?
There's aspects to it. In terms of getting feedback to the devs, I would say it's like an 8 or 9. They are very, again, you've seen how responsive they are in the Discord itself. With the luminaries, it's even more so the case. But there is also, from our side, you can also abuse that in a lot of ways if you're not careful with it. Like you can just pester the devs with nonsense all the time. So it is also something that is kind of used sparingly, if I can put it that way.
Has that been a problem, or is that just like a potential problem?
I wouldn't say it's been a problem. Most of the time...
No juicy luminary drama?
Not really.
Nobody being kicked off for selling a Moloch or anything?
No. Nothing like that yet. No. But yeah, it's... much like the CSM, it is an advisory group. So a lot of times it is the devs reaching out about stuff. And then also, whenever we notice things in the Discord or in our own groups that is sort of starting to become a real issue or that's prevalent, we can just bring it up to them immediately to take a look at. So instead of it going through like, CCP Jotun does a lot of the community stuff. And so it might take him a while to sift through the whole Discord or, enough people pinging him at 2 a.m. in the morning to complain about stuff before it sort of gets taken action on. So the Luminaries is just another avenue of like getting the devs' attention about a specific topic and, having someone look at that stuff as quickly as possible. And so from that aspect, it's been very useful. I do think at times, this is the same issue that the CSM also has had in the past of like the devs either ask for feedback too far into the process, and it's like they can't really change things until after they're done with whatever they're working on at the moment. And so it's it becomes a reactive thing.
Yeah.
Like
that's
I
always
know
been a
lot
big
of
problem.
CS...
Development takes time, and so like you can give feedback, and you're not going to see like they're going to be like, well, that's great, but we can't act on that for at least another 2 or 3 months because what's happening now is like already downstream in the development process.
Yeah, and not only that, it's like they bring something to discuss, and then you sort of give feedback, but at that point, the thing that they're asking feedback on is so far developed and sort of, it's too far done to be changed at that point,
right?
Because the remaining time before that thing needs to be released, there's not enough time to react to the feedback, and so it has to make it into the next cycle.
Has there ever been any time where your feedback is, "Oh my God, don't do that"? Because like a lot, CSM have said that a lot in the past, in previous years, where it's like most of the time what CSM is trying to do is just like whittle away CCP's like worst instincts. But like, is anytime one of your feedback like, "Oh no, that's terrible, don't do it," as opposed to a way to fix it?
I'm trying to think of if there's been an example like that where it's. I guess
maybe you shouldn't give me the details if you have, but I don't know. I don't want to break your NDA or anything like that, but I'm just curious.
No. I'm just thinking like not specifically something. Yeah, it's not something specific, but like the most controversial change there has been in the game has been the manual flying part of the game, right? Moving from like Eve's style of controls where you like the way we've always described it is like, do you command a ship or do you pilot a ship?
Right.
In Eve Online, you are technically commanding the ship.
Correct. You give instructions and it does things.
Yeah. And so with Frontier, it's sort of transitioning into, okay, well, now we want you to actually fly the thing, which means that a lot more of your attention and time is spent sort of glued to the game, rather than like giving an instruction and then you can look at something else or like type in chat or tab out of the game or do whatever. And so that has been probably one of the most controversial things. And then from the Luminary perspective, we saw that discussion and went to them. It's like, this is what the community is sort of feeling about this change. You guys better be pretty damn sure that this is the right direction to go down. Because it is a big sort of pivot away from what Eve is, right?
But I would say that like there have been some controversial stuff, including the manual piloting and even some of the modular stuff. But I think that overall, the results have been successful. I mean, like certainly the manual piloting could continue to use some polish, but it's like I played around with it and I'm like, oh yeah, this is real fun. This is real good. Like I said, one of my favorite moments is like that dogfighting scenario.
Yeah. I mean, there's other things that you can point to, like this cycle specifically. Again, this cycle is so different compared to probably anything
I've seen
that
a lot of
you've
shenanigans
experienced?
about manual shooting with like mining lasers and everybody just trying to use it to draw and stuff. Like that's also been one of the big ones from this.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's willing to take it seriously at the moment.
It's so specifically on the manual aiming stuff. The way it works right now is they removed all of the sort of EVE Online style of weaponry, where you would lock a target and then activate a weapon and it would shoot at that target. The only weapons we have in the game right now is you press 1, it puts a crosshair on the screen, and you have to actually aim at a target and hold mouse button down. That was very painful when this cycle started because
I'm about to say, is that even working?
Yeah, it functions. It's still a bit clunky in some situations, but for the most part, like I've never had issues hitting stuff, but there were some strange they layered old EVE Online like hit mechanics on top of the manual aiming. And so even if your crosshair was on the target, you would still have like glancing blows and things like that. So that was funny to see. But they fixed that fairly recently. But the thing that pained a lot of people was, in order to mine, you had to mine in the same way, which meant when you're mining, you have to hold down mouse 1, which was really painful. Which prompted the next... Yeah. So the way they're approaching that, and again, this is largely my interpretation based on their actions. So it's not like I'm telling you this is what they're going to do. It's sort of, we've made assumptions about how they're designing the game, and so far the actions match those assumptions, right? The way that they're heading, by the looks of things, is that if you choose to perform all of the actions with the ship yourself, so for example, flying the ship yourself, aiming yourself, pressing mouse button 1 to shoot at stuff all on your own, that is the most cost-effective way to play.
Right.
Because you are the one doing everything. If you want automation, such as giving you approach back, or giving you orbiting back, or keep at range, and also your guns automatically tracking a target, all of those things will manifest as those little, like the Tetris blocks that you see with the fitting. So you can add automation to... Yeah.
In one way or another.
So you can add automation to your ship, but that then takes away from its capability, because you could be putting something else in that space, right? And also, those modules have fuel costs and heat generation and sort of all of these other things that can be drawbacks. And so you can see how in a world of multi-boxing, for example, if you play the game as a solo single pilot, your ship is more capable if you do things yourself. It's more cost effective, and that's sort of the trade-off that you make. Like if you want to fly 5 accounts, you can automate aspects of that, but it's going to be less efficient because you're splitting your attention. And so they found this, what looks to be an interesting way to balance out the idea of multi-boxing with people that enjoy solo play. There has been some discussion around this as well that seems to... The assumption, like the bad case assumption is, if the manual actions are not fun, then it forces people to do things that are not fun in order to be competitive, right?
Right.
Because
and unfortunately, there's so much of EVE Online's balance that's balanced around the idea that the things are not necessarily fun. That is actually one of the things that's kind of leaves them in the lurch a lot. And so I hope Frontier, like this idea that it needs to also be fun to play. I remember back in like 2014 or whatever, I was trying to get my friend to come play the game, and I was telling him about all these great things that was happening, all the cool alliances and all the cool stories, and he just looked at me and goes, yeah, but is the game fun to play? Can you tell me that it is fun to play? Why is it fun to play? And I didn't have an answer for him at the time. And it actually, like I wrote an entire thing about fun in EVE Online and what it all means and all that stuff spun from it. But it's true that like there's so much of EVE Online that works because it isn't fun, because it is work. And so to have that as like a priority from the beginning is probably pretty good. And that brings me to the idea that like my takeaway from Eve Frontier so far has been that I am incredibly excited about the game that they are building. This idea of like, building up your ship and your specific clones, and you have your clone banks, and you go out and do exploration in this weird alien world and find stuff where there's so many star systems that people could come and harass you, but you've built up your own little infrastructure with your own little friends on your side of the world, and you've colonized this area. There's so much to Eve Frontiers that, like, when it's ready, if they deliver on those promises, it is so good. But it is also in alpha, and therefore not there yet. So much of the moment-to-moment experience is mostly just like playing around with the Tinker Toys and kind of getting a feel for what this could be. And nothing in this conversation has really changed my opinion on that, both good or bad. But I do want to give you an opportunity for final thoughts or anything that we haven't necessarily covered before we fully wrap up.
Yeah, we've been going for quite a while. I'm sure
you've been going for quite a while. I go for long times all the time. You're the marathon guy today. I really, really appreciate you sitting down and talking this long about all this stuff.
Oh, I can just keep going. Like we haven't even touched on the scale of the universe and the implications that could have.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I've tried to cover a lot of that stuff when we've talked about, and I've gone through the whole white paper and et cetera, et cetera. So I've kind of tried to avoid the stuff that we've already hashed over with people. I mostly just wanted your feelings about this whole thing as someone who's been on the inside the whole time. It's like, but what's really going on? And I'm actually very not reinforced, reassured by this conversation. It sounds like the people that are involved in it are finding a lot of value in it, and that is huge, especially given how much potential it has. It basically has the potential to be way more than EVE Online potentially.
But in the same vein, like, I know that is something that people, they feel that risk of, like, if this thing kicks off, then EVE Online will fall to the wayside, which I don't think is necessarily where it's going to go. The experience are going to be so different from each other that they will have their place, right? And it is good, as much as people, like, don't like FC trying new things. Keeping all of your eggs in one basket is a bad idea, business-wise.
For sure.
Right? So, as much as people don't like...
it's not even just a business thing. There's so, like, as we mentioned earlier, like, there's so much design stuff where, like, having a separate space with separate design allows for better. I keep stressing, this is one of the things I stress on my channel a lot, which is that, like, this is all new shit. We're on, like, the video games, MMOs. Culturally speaking, this is all brand new stuff. We're all just kind of making this stuff up as we go along and figuring it out as we go. And so, like, the idea that you could just have one EVE Online, and from just playing EVE Online or just running EVE Online, they can make the perfect version of EVE Online, I think it's silly. I think having multiple offshoots of the universe with different rules allows us to see the actual impact of those rules. What is like, hey, an EVE Online game that you have to manually... You've wanted manual flying in EVE Online the whole time. What actually changes with the video game if it is more focused on manual piloting versus not manual piloting? And that question cannot be asked just within the constraints of the EVE Online client. It takes two games that are same fundamentals but different in that regard to be able to get that information.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it allows designers to learn from each other when they're building the next thing as well. It's like, we see what that... Right, this game is going in this direction, that game's going that direction. If we ever wanted to do something similar, can we take some lessons from the other game before we go down that path? Things to be careful of, things that seem to be very successful. So in that way, you can, like, explore a lot more about the design space.
And they can do what they call find the fun, right? In a lot of game development, especially early development, you're just trying to find the fun. You have the idea of your mechanics, but you got to figure out like how to actually make it fun. How many hours that they put into making Mario navigation in like Mario games, just a fun enjoyment to play. That takes a ton of polishing, a ton of testing to find where the fun is in all of this. And EVE Online is too established of a game for them to do too much of that in the moment. So EVE Frontiers gives them a really good opportunity to explore those issues with 20 years of experience behind their belt.
Yep, exactly.
All right, well,
I can wrap it up with like a quote from Hilmar. Like
for sure, great.
This idea of like EVE Online is like Italy, right? It was built, or not Italy, it's Rome, the city of Rome. It was built using specific materials, specific knowledge at the time. But it has a vibe to it, right? Even in today, despite all the advances that have occurred around Rome, there's still an experience there that is valuable and is unique. And Frontier is like New York. It is built using different things, different pieces, and it has its own vibe, right? You wouldn't want to put a skyscraper inside of Rome.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. It takes away from what is there. And so what FC is trying to be in this sort of analogy is city planners. They want to be, and this kind of is exactly the thing that you talked about of like different games can have different experiences. It makes them better at making different worlds and sort of, games. But yeah, that's the analogy he tends to use when he talks about Frontier a lot, is Rome versus New York. You can live in both cities, you can visit both cities to get their unique sort of, the thing that they have to offer, but they don't necessarily, the one is not trying to replace the other one.
I'm going to pounce on that idea real quick and say like, so, but like I said, back in like 2019, Hilmar was talking about like, oh, if we ever do a new physics thing, it's going to be a different space that you would have to like change over to and opt into from New Eden. Like it wouldn't be just like one day we go, oh, now physics is different in New Eden. We would have this separate space that would be where that separate physics is. And it's clear that like EVE Frontiers has become the manifestation of that kind of will to have this like, well, what if we did EVE again now and had it be different, but not have it be the core EVE? One of the things one of the tinfoil theories that I've always had is the fact that I think that EVE Frontiers and EVE Online are happening at the same time. I think that Caroline Starr is what woke up the Keeper. That's the thing that he's referring to. And so all this stuff with the lore and stuff is about building the technology to be able to communicate back to New Eden. Because if we get an informational link between New Eden and Frontiers, we could theoretically transmit our infomorph, not our stuff, but our infomorph, our character, our self, from EVE Online to EVE Frontiers and potentially back again, allowing a single identity to potentially move between those two in the same way that Hilmar kind of hinted at back in 2019. Am I crazy?
That is the question. I can point to another quote by him, which is,
excellent.
A city built in the forest. A city built in the forest is built out of wood. A city built in the mountain is built out of stone, and something like a city built in heaven is built out of dreams, or something like that.
Correct.
Like it kind of refers
and that's not Hilmar.
to.
That's not Hilmar. That's Jove. That's a Jove proverb. That's a Jovian proverb.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. He's brought it up like.
Oh yeah. No, they love quoting it for sure. But I'm just saying, like it is, because if you think about it, Jovians settled in the heaven constellation, so that's like a city made in heaven is built of dreams.
Yeah. But the way he uses it, it sort of implies this idea of like, this is all stepping stones to the final form of whatever, Eve can become. And so it could be that like all of these things form part of that final form. So I don't think, I wouldn't say you're crazy, but it's not clear the path that takes us there, right?
I think that FC has clearly like they've put the seeds, so at any time they can be like, and now this is true. But if they don't want to, they never have to get around with it. They did the same thing with Echoes. Echoes has this whole like lore to it about how it's this like fragment universe. And there's always this idea that like, well, maybe we could get the capabilities to travel from one universe to the other. But given the fact that Echoes didn't, I don't know why, but like they were just like, never mind. We're not going to ever touch that subject again and let it just move on. They've learned from things like Dust to not like guarantee the connection, but if things become mature enough, they've always talked about the fact that they would like to be able to make connections after the fact.
All
right.
Yeah, I mean, if you there's one final slide we could probably pull up to finish on. It's the one with the sort of the plan for the remainder of this year.
Oh yeah.
That's probably. At the end of that stuff would probably be a good time to check in again and kind of see how much of what they were aiming for that they sort of hit. Yeah, that one.
All right. Well, if I need to know anything about Frontiers, I'm going to hit you up. If you ever want to come on and talk about something, if there's something worth talking about, let me know and we'll make it happen, man. You've been an incredible dude to talk to about all this. We zero prep besides you showing interest and whatnot, and so I won't lie, I was kind of nervous. I haven't really talked to you about as far as an interview goes, but I was like, this went exactly what I would have hoped for. You've been very knowledgeable and very well spoken.
Sorry to the folks about the techie talk at the start. I know that stuff doesn't interest most people because it's supposed to be hidden.
That's what we do.
But it is it is a big part. What I mean, you should probably sneak peek some of the lore stuff to them as well at some point.
Oh yeah, we have talked about lore stuff too. I will. Yeah, I can show this off at least. You shared with me this video, so explain to me a little bit. So we saw like the clone video from earlier, and I always had confusions about like where that came from. And so this is another example of that. So this is a video. It's published on a person's channel. It's not like an official FC
so the
channel
person
or anything like
is a person is one of the he's a content creator from the Russian community. But they, as part of what they're sort of building into the client is this sort of video player capability. I know it's also existed in EVE Online in some form of another. But they have this capability to like once you find items, you can play videos, and so they've sort of scattered these breadcrumbs all over the game, where people like there's hints and like secrets and things that are hidden, and from time to time the keeper will highlight one of them, and it's kind of it's almost like an ARG, but the starting of it is not known, and then the keeper kind of kicks it off.
That is a real big piece to all of this, which is like, if you do want to get involved with it now, this is a big reason why, is that like every cycle there's these weird mysteries, there's things to discover, like there is like a thing to do. It's not like it's just always sand being washed away on the beach or whatever. Like there is some really exciting stuff going on, especially for you lore nerds that are tinfoily. I just can't. My stuff comes from years of watching it all. This is all so fresh, so new, that it's hard for me to keep track of it all. But so basically there's just an item, this guy discovered it, got this video, captured it, and then posted it on his YouTube, and that's how it got here?
Yeah, so he the video was captured by someone else. One of the Reaper members, what was his name? It's in the alphabet thing. Numok. He's also a content creator that does some YouTube stuff for the game. But he's the one that originally found the item, shared the video with Morales, which is a Russian content creator, and then he put it up on YouTube. And what they started doing is, the typical stuff you would do when you start analyzing things about the game. If like typical
ARG
things you
shit.
might do in an ARG shit, like run it through a spectrogram and invert the colors and like check the grayscale version of the image, and
you get something.
They did all that stuff, and then this is what they found in the audio of the video. So there's some strange characters hidden inside of the audio when you run it through like a spectrogram. And those characters might not be familiar to EVE Online players, but to Frontier players, this is like one of the 3 languages that they are in the process of developing. And so we've started to kind of decipher some of those languages and what the characters mean, and mapping them over to the English alphabet. Even if you translate it from this language to English, it is not necessarily English words. And I remember during your FanFest VODs, when I went over them again, you had some questions about this thing on the ship.
Oh, yeah.
Because so we got this. So that is the name of the world boss in that language.
Okay.
I think I can make my best attempt at the pronunciation, because the dev said it on stage, but it's something like Haroti Tetovisa, and so part of what they're doing now is sort of the linguistic part of the world is also being developed. So eventually we should be able to speak these languages as well, as we figure out how they're pronounced.
I can't dark mode this. This is a fucking picture.
I'm
sorry.
Picture.
It's an image.
But yeah, so the TLDR of this is they translated the stuff they found in the audio. It pointed to a system on the map that was fairly close to where someone was. The person built some gates to get to that system, and they found a ship there, sort of the first of the ships that are being released next week.
That one?
And they are based... Yeah, so
okay.
The one in the video. It's one of the old ships that's being reintroduced. But it's like... Yeah, at this moment in time in the video game, that person is the only one that is in that ship, because he's the only one he's the one that found it first.
Oh, that's so fucking cool.
And so until next week, he's the only one that can fly the ship for about a week, and then the rest of us can sort of start.
Is everybody like trying to come kill him now because of that, or?
There's been some squabbling over who gets to play with the toy, based on who contributed to this process, but I'll leave it to those guys to figure out.
Yeah, and thank you. I'm glad that we were able to finish up on this, because again, like this question of like, well, is this game worth checking out right now? Like, there is this very, very interesting, like, we are just now exploring this universe, and so it's not just the systems or whatever, but it's also like the lore and what has happened here. And there is like this isn't the first time that they've done something like this. They've been pretty consistently making sure that like there's things to figure out, not just blind, so like in EVE Online, a lot of times we'll have little tokens that are just a bunch of gobbledygook or whatever, but like a lot of the stuff in EVE Frontiers seem to be actually revealing pieces of information that helps us understand the world more, or get access to things that we didn't have before or whatever, in a very real way that I've been pretty pleased with, but again, not actively involved enough to really be part of. But
so things like these ship reveals is sort of a side quest. There is a main sort of through line, sort of the big picture thing that's going on, and what that's pointing to at the moment is there is a structure. So they're positioning the resets, like the cycles of the resets, as like the black holes sort of making the environment uninhabitable. If you've ever read like the Dark Forest books and like the repeating of civilizations in that series, it's sort of the same idea, where the conditions of survival is getting so bad, it's like, okay, we have to go into like hibernation, and then when conditions are favorable again, we come out again and then try and survive. It's sort of playing on that same idea.
That stuff is very well established in the lore. You can go onto the website and go through the different chronicles and stuff that they posted. I've talked about it already, but what's interesting is that so the Keeper specifically said that the time is not ready yet right now, but he's still undergoing the protocols because he's witnessed the death of the star, which I think is Caroline's star. So there is like a there, but you're right. Like, so there's a certain canonicity to the cycles.
Yeah, and so there is a structure in the game now where players have to donate items to that structure, which they get from the world boss. So you have to go out in this massive universe, find this world boss, get items from it, and then bring it back to this shear breaker. The idea is, so shear is the thing that like destroys all structures and ships and things that is exposed to it. And the shear breaker is the thing that can prevent or withstand shear. And so it sort of hints to this idea of like once we rebuild the shear breaker, the cycles will end. And they've played into it a little bit. The people that were sort of the super invested lore nerds, they were building structures and bases at the shear breaker, and those things, some of it survived from cycle 5 into cycle 6. And so everybody's
no!
Everybody's like, we need to get over there. This is the place where we can like make permanent progression. And so all of the big tribes and groups and stuff has just been like racing over there during this cycle, kind of having this unspoken race between the groups of like who can get there first, who can establish control. And so it's turning into this whole it's getting interesting, at least for the tribes. For the solo player, they might not be as aware that this stuff's going on, but for the sort of very invested player groups, it's turned into a very interesting situation where FC is kind of getting us all to congregate at the same place and sort of start to engage with each other.
That's so cool.
So
wait,
we'll see how that pans out.
That raid boss, there's the huge raid boss.
Yeah.
Have they killed it yet? Because every time I've seen them attempt it, they failed.
So we had the old version, which was known as the Moon Eater.
Moon Eater, that's what it is.
Those have been defeated, but they just run away as soon as they get close to dead, and then they sort of leave some loot behind. So that was during the past cycles. In the more recent cycles, since they've introduced Zerodi, which is this, the name that I attempted to pronounce. Hopefully, FC Dramaturg doesn't hit me over the head because of the pronunciation. But so that's sort of an upgraded version of the Moon Eater. And so far, you can go and find a stream of where CCP or FC Jotun tried beating it with like he formed a fleet with riders, like people playing, and they went at it, and it just tore them to shreds because it has like a swarm of drones surrounding it that just if the drones focus one person, they just die. And so it's this cat and mouse game of like trying to stay away from the swarm while shooting at the world boss. And then the swarm focused FC Jotun and just blew him up. And he was sort of the tank because he was using a battleship when everybody else didn't have access to them.
We watched that video, so yeah.
Yeah. And so when he went down, it's like, okay, there's no chance that any of us can survive this thing. So as of right now, nobody has beaten Zerodi, but you can interact with it. You can trade with it. You can bring it sort of offerings, and it will give you other items in return. That is something that they've continued to pursue with Frontier, is shooting NPCs might not always be the right thing to do.
Right.
And I think you've talked about it as well. If like you can cultivate NPCs and like give them time to grow before you kill them, so that you get better stuff.
And Eve actually, there's so many Eves. Eve Echoes actually has or had a component of that too. Not quite explicitly, but like, so some of the best dungeons or some of the best sites to fight actually like escalate over time, like become stronger versions of the site. And so once you find the site, do you kill it now, or do you guard it to let it upgrade and then kill it? And it looks like that has kind of come back again into Frontiers. Yeah,
and just, this is also a part of the game that could make its way over to EVE Online, because a lot of the new sort of systems and functions and stuff that they're building to author the ferals with, those tools exist in Carbon now. And so, they could revisit like Drifter AI and make them more intelligent and doing all sorts of like interesting things. Because that's something we do have with Frontier is the ferals roam around. They will, like the other day, you can probably find clips of it on stream. With the stream we did last Friday with FC Jotun, where someone would just, like one of us would be exploring looking for a specific rat to kill, which was the quest that they had us do last week. There was a hunt quest, and people could like earn rewards and stuff for killing the most of them. But then just a fleet of like 10 ferals just warp in on a member randomly, and I think at one point I was like, you guys should probably warp on me. I just got jumped by a bunch of rats in the middle of nowhere.
Man, I used to love invasions and dealing with the different roaming packs and everything.
Yeah, so
very cool.
Yeah, there's interesting things that they're trying here that I think will eventually trickle over to Frontier as well. I mean, to EVE Online as well. So,
all that said, I will say that the phone call I got earlier was my son letting me know that they are coming over. So he's coming over to stay for the weekend. So I could probably sit here and talk to you about this for hours. But at some point, we got to call this good and leave people wanting more. There was a question one more time of where the Shearbreaker was.
Where it is in Amir. If you look for the sisters, or if you look at the systems and search for it, it's Amir. It's like way at the top of the map, isolated. It's sort of like the throne of Frontier right now. So.
And also, I mean, Ocky is in the Convocation Discord, so if you want to come and hit him up, I mean, obviously he's also in the Frontiers Discord, so hit him up if you want to for all that sort of stuff. But do we already have a segment somewhere on multi-boxing? Oh boy. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, I've talked about it before. Maybe I should do a full segment. But with all that said, any other final thoughts or anything? Otherwise, I should probably get to the giveaway and other content.
Yeah. Apologies to everybody waiting here for that content.
No, they can. I think they can wait.
This has gone on way longer than I think we anticipated. But no, it's been great. Thanks for having me hop on, kind of yap a bit.
Absolutely.
I think both of us are in the same vein. Like we can just keep going and going for hours. So it would be.
I'll have to have you on again.
Yeah, at any time if you think there's something, like if something pops up and you think it's like maybe it's time to talk Frontier again, like just hit me up and we can chat again.
Excellent. Okay, well, hold on, something just happened weird. There it is. Sorry, your camera. Trying to balance everything with my computer and having everything show correctly. Well, you can take off if you want, or you can hang out while we do the rest of it. Yeah, well-spoken, Ocky. Thank you so much. You've done such a great job today helping us understand a little bit more about eFrontiers and talking about your experiences with it. I really, really, really appreciate it. And, feedback in chat seems to be that people really enjoyed it as well, in spite of all of the technical stuff. So thank you very much. You're free to stay if you want. Pleasure.
I think I'll hop off. So
okay, great.
I'll say goodbye.
All right. Have a good one.
But I'll still be lurking in stream too. If people have questions, they can either hit me up on Discord or wherever, and I can keep talking about stuff.
Heck yeah. All right. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right.
See you around.
We are going to do the giveaway. So, exclamation point plunder in chat for the Legion skin giveaway. Let me pull that up real quick. The Cyber Knight, Conid Cyber Knight skin. We talked about this last stream. I personally feel like this is going to be one of the more valuable ones of them because of the Legion. It's got special effects that we're not 100% sure what they are yet, but and you can see the Cyber Knights on the side, and it's got this cool black and silver vibe of the Conid. It is currently, just so you guys know, if you don't win, it is currently available on the Nest store, which I'm actually going to make the choice to do it this way instead. I know Thran's contracted me one, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to spend 250 plex to then gift this to somebody as a way of doing it, so that way we don't have to worry about the actual skin license itself. So just make sure ! Plunder for your chance to win. We will. If there's anybody curious about whether or not they're in, if anybody suspects that they might not have gotten a ticket, please say something now. I can double check to make sure that you are in. I know sometimes this is not as great as it has been, but it looks like it's been working pretty good today. But if, like I said, if anybody suspects that you didn't get a ticket when you were supposed to, I have 32 people in. That was a really good interview. Unfortunately, I don't know if I'm going to have a ton of time to talk about the other stuff today. We had UI stuff. We have MER stuff. We might just have to stream again tomorrow or next Monday. This might be we might have to start doing 2 episodes a week if there's that much content. Happy to. Also, I do still plan on doing the X4 thing today. Make sure to pay attention to Discord and the Asherathi Decanted channel for that if you're at all interested. I'd love to have your guys' help as I check out the game for the first time. All that said, is that it for the people coming in? Looks like everybody's good. Everybody's good. Everybody's good. All right, let's go ahead and make the poll. Confirmed today that Cassandra Tyrannos currently also doesn't charge and fire their Doomsdays. That is an interesting thing. So one of the things that we're learning is it looks like the original drifters, so the Apollo, Artemis, Cassandra, Orion, all of those guys, as well, basically all of the drifters that spawn in the drifter wormholes appear to not be using their Doomsday anymore. FC's response to this seems to be confusion, so it's possibly a bug. The drifters that are inside of the home front for the abyssal asteroid home front does appear to still have its Doomsdays, and drifters that are supposed to have their Doomsdays in Pochfin still have their Doomsdays. So be careful out there. But the basic Apollo, Artemis, Cassandra, and Orion, as well as the other one, the main one from the drifter wormhole, appear to not have their Doomsday working yet, or as of right now. Again, FC has acted confused by this, so expect it to potentially get fixed at some point. But in the meantime, it is true. That said, that gives me enough time to close this, and now we're going to pull a winner. 3, 2, 1. Iridon K4M. Go ahead and X up with your in-game name, and I will send you this Legion skin. Congratulations. I just saw you talking, so you can't have gone far. I can't agree that you have gone far. Iridon K4M? There you go. I just need your in-game name, and then I can give it to you. All right. Well, congratulations to you. And you didn't even have to give me several $1,000s to get it. It's so cool. We all love that. Man, the feedback, the response to my video and my stream about Loru has been very, very interesting. I might make a follow-up to that at some point, thinking about my thoughts about the whole thing. I have been responding in the comments to a lot of people with longer thought out comments. I do feel like I want to take this conversation seriously. As many as people want to try to make this about like the pride flag or whatever it is. All right. I think let's try it. I really hope that you didn't misspell your name or whatever. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, why didn't that work? Hold on. Aha. That one, right? Yeah, that guy. That looks right. I think that's correct. Let's give it a shot. I just in the moment I just realized it's like this is 250 plex. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it back if I typed it in wrong, but I think it's correct. Let's just go. I mean, it took it. So if you gave me the wrong name, it's your fault, not mine. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Yeah, I really think that we will probably wrap this up here, just because that ended up being such a long but good interview. Let me look real quick. Oh, there is some patch notes. Let's make sure we go over the news. There is the HUD thing. I already was kind of hesitant to talk about the HUD thing just because of the fact that, let's be frank, in this they show no images. There's no information that's meaningful other than telling us that it's happening, which we kind of already knew was happening. There is going to be several other blogs, which include previews, and it will be on feature preview at some point. So I don't have too much news other than the existence of the blog at the moment. We will, of course, dig into that, so make sure to subscribe to the channel or come into the Discord for that. But also, let's see, we have the skill boost bundles have been refreshed, so if you're interested in that, you can now get them again. The one thing I will say to this is probably wait till they're on sale again, because they do go on sale. Oh no, I have a doorbell. That means it might be them here. Hold on. And yeah, that was my son. So I need to wrap things up now. But there has been some patch notes, including some changes to entropic disintegrators and Vorton projectors and the way that they heat build up. I want to look more into what that means, because that can be a very important thing based on the fact that they're a single weapon system. There's also some fixes to capital jump portal generation balance stuff, and command carriers being able to use all of their micro jump drives. Some typos, etc. One of the interesting things that I did want to show off about this patch, going over to HoboLeaks, we can see 3 days ago they added in, when they did all this other stuff, they added in all of these clouds that are all the checkpoints. And so this is actually the reason why I'm here in this location. So this is the system of Onamon, which is the Caldari military headquarters, and we can see that this is the Serenalen Stargate, and we can also see that there is these other Stargates. And if we go back to the HoboLeaks, we can see that these are the Stargates, right? So we have Pyac, we have Unalin. So all of these clouds, all these checkpoints are basically all of the Stargates that lead out of the military headquarters. So in any of the military headquarters, it's the gates to adjacent systems. Right, like we have a Mignon and a Goz are adjacent to Valor, etc., etc. Now, this is not in the patch notes. There is no mention about this, and when I am at the location, there's nothing here that shows me that anything is different. There's no beacon in space here. There's nothing necessarily that gives us an idea of what this is for, and it's a cloud. So, and I don't see any cloud effects or anything here. So I will just say my tinfoil for this is I think that they're putting in something to set up for them to activate later involving the military headquarters. So something to be paying attention to, especially as we get to the final wrapping up phases of this military campaign. But unfortunately, I don't have anything else beyond just like this is weird aspect of it at the moment. But I did want to make sure to bring those up to you guys today. And again, we aren't going to get around to the MER, but I've also been told that the MER is kind of not overly exciting today. But again, I think that this has been an incredible conversation today, and I really appreciate everybody hanging out with me. Like I said, I put out my video about Loru, an edited version for that yesterday, or at least a cutout segment. I have more cutout segments, including New Eden News, which is now available for members. They get their videos a day early. and I still need to edit the mining guide, and there's some other videos that need to come out. So that's all going to come out over the next, hopefully, a couple of days. And then I'm going to do my best to, on Monday, we're going to stream again, especially if there's more to talk about and cover stuff about this, these other topics. Maybe, can't promise that 100%, but going to shoot for that. And then today, hopefully, all things possible, I should be streaming on my decanted channel for X4. But like I said, like we always say, real life comes first. My son is here, so we're going to have to see how it all plays out. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel and hit into the Discord so that way you can get any up-to-date news about all these kinds of things and more. All that said, clickbait style has attracted new players over the years. Should we be worried that without him, can the game survive only us and old players? There's something I didn't say about the Loru situation last time as much that I'm going to just say again, or like in reference to that, which is that the one thing that Loru has done for me over the years is get me to respect and really appreciate Manic Velocity so much more, right? Manic Velocity was that same kind of niche character of like the showman Eve streamer, and he did a really great job, and I really miss him. But the moral of the story is, even if Loru goes away, that will just create a vacuum that can then be filled in by the community. So I'm not overly worried. I'm more worried about like the slippery slopes of policy or the mudding of the waters, making it harder for content creators and the community management team to kind of like walk the fine line between acceptability and non-acceptability. That's more of what I'm focused on when it comes to this, rather than Loru specifically. In fact, if all of this becomes an opportunity for Loru to improve himself and we can all like learn a thing or two, then that's great. I'm totally open to the idea of no one's beyond redemption. I of all people should argue that no one is beyond redemption. I think that is in fact the case. So I'm hopeful, but at the same time I'm also very confident that the player base will continue to make good content creators that make great content that is enjoyable for EVE Online. Loru was not the first, and he won't be the last. Bombeldo the Wizard is actually pretty cool. I've checked out a bunch of his stuff, or some of his stuff recently. But yeah, there's plenty of great content creators, so I'm not overly worried about it. All right, with all that said, I'm an Ashtarothi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put EVE into context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Thank you guys for coming with me on today's journey. It's been a pretty crazy one. Like I said, I've got plenty of stuff to go check out on the YouTube guides, etc., etc. Please make sure to share my content out there, because that's how it gets out there. I don't get shared around by FC or anything, so it's up to you guys to make the choice to support and share my work, and I really, really appreciate those who do, both sharing and also supporting. And to that end, thank you very much for all of you who do choose to support the channel, either by, just like I said, just watching the videos, liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing around, but also picking up merch potentially, becoming a patron or a member on the channel. You get access to the cool emotes and early videos, edits, and of course the supporter channel, etc., etc. You guys are awesome, and I want to thank every single one of you, but I especially want to thank my Immortal tier supporters: 745 MPSI, Arydanika the Queen, Bad Boy Smooth, Eboleet, Erladis, Elange, Flash Gordon, Grims, May, Malak Starfire, Malin, Mercuton, Mayak, Morkar, Michael, Neelam, LM1, Sheesh, Susuro, Thrans, and Rid. Thank you all so much, and I will also say very special thanks to Arydanika the Queen, who has been putting together my birthday present to get me a new video card. It's been it warms my heart, and just to see everybody excited about it. And I again have stayed pretty far out of it so far, so I don't really know the progress of it, but it means a lot to me that she would be willing to do that, and that people have been willing to back it. So thank you all so much. I've been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and until next time, here's my son. Tell them that they'll see me in space.
You'll see them. You'll see him in space.
07.
Bring on the wrecking machine. For every city